Welcome back to the Brennan Page. I am Dwayne Page.
And this is Kyle Brennan. Tonight we had the pleasure of speaking with Zach Redding, who I don't need to read off his list of accolades because I think I know them. Zach is from Dallas/Fort Worth, Texas. He went to Texas Tech as a center fielder out of high school, then transferred to a JUCO for a couple years, had a bunch of like all conference this and that, then goes to Wichita State, plays there for a year or two, then has a GA position. And in 2018, Zach joined the Houston Astros as a strength conditioning intern. And then he's been with the Astros since. He's made it all the way up from low A, high A, 2 years in Triple A, made it all the way up to the big leagues as a strength coach, and is now he elected to become the strength conditioning coordinator for the organization, meaning that he is in charge of the minor league strength coaches and the overall minor league philosophy of all things strength and conditioning. Um, so yeah, I Zach and I spent high A together, which was 2021 in Asheville. We lived together, and Zach and I became good friends pretty quick. And yeah, when Dwayne, you and I started this podcast, I've had Zach in mind from the get go, and it worked out where we could have him on tonight, and it was a good time.
Yeah, Zach was a pleasure to have on the podcast. A professional, for sure. A professional is a good way to describe him. He's very well versed. What I liked was him talking about the various things that he is passionate about, and it was interesting to hear how whenever something came up, he just did his research, which is kind of a testament to how he is as an individual. And it, without a doubt, to me, is why he is good at his job. I think he gave some good insight to, you know, players aspiring to be high level college athletes, professionals, parents, amateurs on the strength and conditioning world. And honestly, it was just a pleasure to have on, and I look forward to having him on again. Great dude.
So where are you?
I'm in Houston right now.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah.
wasn't sure if you were traveling around there or anything.
No, I might go to West Palm here next week at some point. That's my
Yeah,
next trip, I think.
gotcha. Yeah, I was worried
Yeah.
that it's like, man, he might be in like West Palm or something, which for the folks listening, that means that he wakes up at 5 a.m. instead of like us on the affiliate schedule, which is more of a 8 or 9 a.m. wake up.
Well, I'm
So
not. I'm not gonna lie. When you said meeting at 7, I'm like, oh, great. I had 2 hours, and you're like, I'm getting on at 12. I'm like, oh shit, Eastern time. So I immediately forgot and hopped on. I was like in the middle of cutting my hair. I'm like, oh, I better get on. You know, it
you look
worked out.
good.
I appreciate it. Fresh shave.
No, yeah, I've certainly
That's
had that.
dope.
I've certainly had that thought.
I want to fucking shave my head so badly, dude. I
Do it.
really do. I really do. I don't know why. It's
It's
like
much
every day.
cooler.
My hair is so long right now. It doesn't, you can't really see it, but it's long. I wake up every morning and I just look at myself and I look at my buzzer and I'm like, tomorrow. And then I just do that every day.
The problem I have with it is that if I do it for it to get back to where it is, it's gonna take like a year, and I feel like once I do it, I'll never stop, and
Well,
I'm just
that's the
not.
thing. You may do it, and then it just may never grow back. That's what happened to me. I feel like it's like I always had it short, and then I went zero, and then it was just it kind of like right here was just on hiatus for forever. So you gotta be careful.
Yeah, but you
That's the
got a good
concern.
shaped head. You know, at least you don't have like some weirdly, I don't know,
Like the
weirdly shaped
wrinkles,
head.
those people
Yeah.
that have like the belly wrinkles in the
Yeah, yeah,
back,
yeah. Yeah.
where you
That's
gotta
what I'm
pull your
saying.
skin over your head, over your eyes, so you can get a good shape.
Jeez.
You also have a profession where like you're 6'2",
Mm,
240 or 50 or whatever, and you just bald head, beard, and like, hey, Lego,
yeah,
let's
yeah. This is
lift.
the strength coach starter pack. Was what I'm going for.
Yeah, that actually tracks. Yeah, that tracks.
Oh man,
Oh man,
that's good to see you, dude.
good to
So,
see you guys.
what is new in the world of Zach Redding?
Oh man. Um, what's new is more or less this year is just kind of a new role, new responsibility. a different position that I'm starting in. So it's more or less just trying to get a little bit more comfortable in the different responsibilities while still, having a similar role with different players and different setting. So kind of just getting my feet wet and understanding what those roles are, and kind of how to keep the normalcy in what I'm used to doing, but then also kind of expanding out of my comfort zone to try to get more responsibility and things like that. So it's a little bit different, but trying to find my shoes more or less.
Yeah, you've had a different role for the past, outside of going back-to-back years in AAA. You've been doing something new every year. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I think 18 was my first year as an intern, and then 19 was low A, 20 was COVID, 21 was high A, 22 and 23 were AAA, and then 24 was the big leagues, and then 5 I took a step in a different direction as a coordinator, but yeah, something different.
How do you find the role as a coordinator being different than what you've done in the past?
I find it uh, fulfilling in a different way than we're accustomed to. I guess it's like a coach interacting with players, but more of a coach interacting with the coach. So obviously, it's the standard or the day to day is upholding the philosophy that we've created. But then it's also developing the coaches in a way of how they can develop the players. So it's like a one hand removed, I guess, interaction where it's like, how can I develop the coach to better interact with the players so that they can better have a fine tuned understanding of what our philosophy is without straying too far away from what our core pillars are. Um, but it's kind of fulfilling is to understand what shortfalls or what successes or strengths our coaches may have, and then how I can try to facilitate growth in different areas they might be lacking in, or how they can help me grow in areas that I might be lacking in as well. So it's a fun environment, it's a fun relationship, but then again, it's almost over communicating. For me, it seems like over communicating just because I might not communicate as much as I should. So it's me understanding how I need to get better with that facet of things, as far as like how I can make sure coaches aren't going like falling between the cracks and they feel like they're not on an island because at times they are at affiliates. So uh, improving in like the people management skills as well.
It's got to be cool to see like the ripple effect that you have as far as your philosophy is going down to these other strength coaches. Because I know from my experience, I have very small sample size of getting a little bit older, and now guys that I've coached in the past are starting to become travel coaches themselves, and I've gotten the pleasure to work with a guy who is a mentor of mine, and he always talks about being able to hear his own words or see his own philosophies get kind of spread and sort of modified or refined in different ways because everybody has their own styles and own flavors. So that's got to be cool to see that from your perspective as well.
It is. I think it's really cool because you'll. I think one of my favorite things about strength conditioning is like the periodization and the programming of like different stimulus and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like that's kind of where I've had my biggest impact as of now, which is how I can interact with the coaches and how they program. And it's really cool to see how like we'll meet one on one, we'll meet as a staff, and then we'll talk about different training philosophies and exercises that are possibly like the best route to take for this player, or based off of what stimulus we're trying to provide or what adaptation we're trying to get, what can we better suit our training to help facilitate those goals. And then as they start to manipulate or kind of absorb some of those training strategies and then see it kind of come to fruition with how they carry out their programming changes throughout the rest of the year. It's interesting to see because not only are they taking a change, making a change in a direction that I think is correct, but then also I kind of manipulate some of those variables a bit differently, which might go beyond what I had originally thought, and then now it's even better than what I had sought out for it to become. So it's cool how they can take things and run with
It's got to be a bit, uh, maybe scary is not the right word, but there's a bit of trust that you have to have in not being one on one with players all the time, which has been the case since probably for all of your career and even in college to this point, where you're used to having your set of guys and just diving in with them, and now you're like a step removed,
it. Yeah.
or even a few steps removed.
No, yeah, it's weird because obviously we want to maintain a similar standard, especially like from affiliates down in low levels to the higher levels. Understanding how there's little intricacies that are specific to each level, but um, and giving the coaches their autonomy because obviously we want them to grow and not just be confined to what we prescribe, but give them some leeway to kind of experiment and kind of get more familiar with different strategies. But at the end of the day, too, you're like, well, we're kind of missing the mark, or maybe we should change a little bit of this because obviously there is still a lot of learning to go on. I know when I was a first year strength coach with the org, I had zero experience. I had like maybe like a half a year as a GA in the weight room. So it's a younger field to kind of come into. So it definitely needs some guidance. But I think given the full reign of the of the kitchen sink, kind of let them run with the variables and see what they can come up with is how we can at least create some, uh, I guess, learning opportunities.
Yeah, it's got to be a skill in itself, knowing when to, like you said, you kind of, especially early on, you're going off of these coaches, what they feel their players need, and what they have done in the past. And as you get more experience, it's definitely a skill to say, hey, we're missing the mark, or hey, this isn't productive, or this is actually like hurting us long term, or could lead to injuries. Like, what was that like for you earlier on? I'm sure that wasn't easy because even I can relate as a younger coach. Like sometimes seeing a certain drill structure and being like, this is a waste of time, or like this is just shit. Honestly, you know.
Yeah. No, I think one of the things that I kind of assumed is that it will be kind of taken um, in a bad way. Like, but in general, it kind of came across in a good way, I guess. Like, maybe, I don't know if it's the way I represented it, but whenever I come across with some, you know, some coaching changes or some things that I would consider changing from a coach's repertoire or like the way they're going about things, it almost was enlightening that it would kind of get received in a welcoming manner. Like, yeah, I would really like to hear more feedback as far as what you think I can improve on, which is like the best outlook to have on like a situation like that. And I was actually very happy to have that because I was nervous going in too. It's like I know if it were me, obviously I would like to have that same frame of mind as well, but on the other side, you don't know if they're going to be reluctant to change or be a little hesitant to try to change because they think they might know or they have a better reason as to why. So I think opening up the the conversation as to why do you do this, so that way they can give like a little bit of background as to why they might be doing something a specific way. And then if they feel like they're open or they have like that crack in the doorway to where like they're a little bit maybe open into some criticism, then you can kind of support that and kind of, you know, feed that a little bit into that in that coaching interaction.
I
Yeah.
think when we understand we're all there to serve the player, and
Mm-hmm.
when we can kind of lead with that, and that we're there to help these guys perform at their best capabilities, their best abilities, when you approach it from that standpoint, and then you're also from your side of of things, you're well informed, you have reasoning as to why you want to make these kinds of changes that can be interpreted in that way. So I'm glad that that was received in that way for you. I'm sure that was really encouraging.
For sure. Made it a lot easier for me when they're at least open to, you know, criticism.
Yeah. That's huge as a coach that you still want to be coached yourself. Like the whole
Hmm.
process of improving and putting work in and learning and trying to apply it and getting some constructive feedback and then also being supported from above. Like when you have good staff members that are like that's something they're interested in. It makes a big difference. And you've had for the past 3 years you've been working with AAA guys and big leaguers, which in case people are unaware, like those players don't have to say yes to you with many things, if anything. So like a lot of your conversations are, which is something I really wanted to ask you about. Like a lot of those conversations are, it's a conversation with them, not a the Astros didn't put you in the big leagues because you're standing up in front of a bunch of grown men that have been in the league for 8 years and you're yelling at them to run faster. Like that's not the job. um, so I guess what I'm getting to is you've been refining the skill of uh, trying to help elicit some positive change um, in grown adults. to this point.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things, like you said, Dwayne, was like everybody wants to support the players in their development, and as do the players. Obviously, they want to be in the best shape and place to succeed on the field every day. So obviously, we break down what their goals are day to day. We can obviously plug in like bits of things that we can help sell to them that is obviously important based off of the research, based off of previous experiences, etc. Um, so at the end of the day, if we can understand like, hey, your goal is this, these are things that we can do to help you improve. And obviously, like the Astros philosophy, or any S&C philosophy has its merit. But if you don't understand each like small bits and pieces of it, and can support it and not sell it, but like describe it to the players as to why it's important, then you won't get that same feedback. But if you can explain exactly what you're trying to get, what it will do for them, and then how it will make them successful, and then kind of give and take where you can, because obviously they're going to have a little bit standoffish tendencies at times, given that they're making or stand to make a bunch of money on playing one day. And if you ask them to do something that could make them sore or not have them perform at their peak for that day, then they might be a little hesitant to do something. But then it's like, hey, like, not are we only playing for today, but we're playing for tomorrow too. So it's not like it's a longer journey than just what's right in front of you. Well, keeping that in mind when you try to get across to the players.
I'm sure the same can be said for lots of athletes, but dealing with baseball players, especially like again from my experience anyways, these guys, they love habits. They're creatures of habits. They have but they just have routines that they want to stick to. They have, I don't want to deviate from this. And I know a lot of baseball players throughout my career anyways, and even as a coach, they often just don't want to touch weights because they don't want to be sore to throw or whatever. So I'm sure that could I'm sure you have your battles in
Yeah,
regards to dealing with these guys.
they are. They are. And I will say, I don't know if it's just like maybe the turning of the tides as far as like the players that are coming through. I will say that it's probably a little bit easier now to get buy-in. I feel like a lot of the players in the big leagues now have had a history of coming up through some S&C, and I've actually seen some of the benefits of like a well-structured periodized program, um, that's more tailored towards baseball specifically. So I think that we're kind of getting the benefits of that of recent past. Like obviously the old timers that are kind of coming up in a more old school training methodology are still pretty hesitant or have their own way of doing things, which I mean obviously if they're in the league for that long, they probably have merit, uh, but I will say it's a little bit easier to get some buy-in with some of the new players that have still been in there for a few years.
I think, I mean, from my perspective, that's not really surprising. Number one, you turn on the TV and you watch a big league game and you see a lot of dudes running around freaking looking jacked, honestly. So, like, that number one. And then for even my experience as a player to what I watch happening now is there's a lot of exposure at younger ages to doing some sort of strength and conditioning. And I think for the private section, for youth guys, for high school kids, for even lower level college players, there's a lot of these programs out there that are being tailored towards baseball players specifically. I had a good conversation with a friend of mine who he works in strength and conditioning, and he's dedicated so much time because he wasn't a baseball player or anything like that, but he's dedicated so much time, and watching him become so invested in baseball because he works with so many baseball athletes is just such a fun experience. Like I'll catch him at the end of the night and be like, "Yo, you hopping in to take some swings now?" and shit like that. But I love that. It's not really surprising to me, and I'm sure that from your perspective, that's really encouraging.
Yeah, I think it's like obviously there's a lot that can be applied from S&C, but it's a very technical sport. So you have to kind of find smaller or more I guess exact ties of how we can not only improve like their like their physicality, but then also how can we improve performance from like a technique side as well. So it's interesting on how we can kind of work from both ends of the spectrum at that side as well.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have an S&C background or anything like that, but from my perspective, it seems like for baseball, it's traditionally been, okay, you're hurt and now you're getting like a surgery or you're doing PT, and like that's somebody's physical therapy, and then they do some sort of strength and conditioning, and it doesn't start from a good place. I feel like doing strength and conditioning from a baseball player's perspective always just kind of happens because they get hurt, and then they're working back to being healthy, and then they're trying to maintain their health. Whereas now I feel like it's trending in a direction where, like, let's make you really athletic, let's try to prevent these injuries, let's try to, have longevity, because I think that we see in the game nowadays, like, guys are blowing out left and right, whether it's like elbow injuries, shoulder injuries, knees, you name it. I think the information's out there that having some sort of strength and conditioning can just help you with your longevity.
For sure. I think, not to go down too deep of a rabbit hole, but I feel like baseball's now kind of fallen subject to extreme early specialization, where we will have guys that are peaking at velocities at like 95, 98 miles per hour while they're still growing and adapting to just the maturation process of growing into an adult. And then I feel like a lot of that kind of takes its toll, and definitely having a proactive, regime of taking care of your body and doing what you need to do in the weight room to counteract a lot of those asymmetries that happens from specializing in a sport that's very single-sided can obviously go a long way. But it's interesting.
Yeah, when you say like specialization, are you talking about like guys that just play baseball? Like, is that, or is it in the way that they train? Like, what do you mean by that?
I mean, like if like if you spend like if you're 12 years old and all you play is baseball and you play 10 out of 12 months, um, and you obviously will get really good because that's the majority of your time you spend practicing will be towards baseball, and you'll have benefits from that. But then you'll end up possibly peaking and then not having the athletic development that you might get from playing multi sports. So early specialization, more or less, just spending the majority of their time in one sport without experiencing sports that could end up developing other capacities and other properties from an athletic development standpoint that they'll miss from just playing in one sport. Like golf is another sport that tends to have a lot of early specialization and chronic low back issues and things like that, just from a lot of rotating and kind of limiting their daily dose of activity to just one thing over and over and over again.
I feel like so much of strength training now, I guess in response to that, is it's almost like programming in different variables, like moving in different planes of motion or getting different types of stimulus in because the athlete's not getting it from something else. Where like you're maybe doing some more rotation work in the gym in the opposite, the non-dominant side, or you're doing more like extensive repeat biometrics, or trying to do like create some random like reaction drill that's sort of random, but it's in an enclosed environment, and they're trying to like program in some things to make someone more athletic because the player hasn't been doing those things. Where if like, yeah, the kid just got back from basketball practice, then you're like, oh, okay, I just need him to make sure he just keeps his strength training up and does some rotational work, and that's it.
Yeah, I think like I said, baseball is such a technical sport that you can see some of the best athletes that just aren't patterned to do the most rudimentary movement skills. Um, just kind of honestly astonishing. So I mean, a lot of even then, as far as just developing just those basic five matter or motor pattern skills of a squat, a hinge, a push, pull, which you'd be surprised if as many guys just can't really do it like a hinge or a squat or things like that. So even from that side of things, it's not necessarily as specific as some like med ball exercise, but even getting a little bit further removed as far as like, well, can you actually do a body weight push up? Can you actually do like a lunge or an RDL, which obviously has crossover to sport, but as the way that they can kind of have motor control among their bodies and in space, but it's just kind of seems a little backwards, but that's kind of what it is. Obviously, they come to play baseball, not to play gym, but now they just try to have to work backwards.
Zach, if you think we rewind rewound, that's a hard one to say, the clock by like 20, 30 years, um Do you think athletes or just kids that were running around and doing different things like climbing monkey bars and out playing soccer and then dribbling it and then throwing it and all that stuff, do you think back then those kids could do a bodyweight push-up and could hinge and knew some of these things? Um, and meaning that like you wouldn't have needed some of the like the strength coach at that age? Or do you think that the
Like just from doing those activities in isolation from like training is what you're saying?
yeah,
I don't know. I mean, maybe. I mean, I would probably assume they'd probably pick it up quicker. I don't know if they would have like the ability to just do it at the drop of a hat, but I would say that probably when they have more of those exposures to different sports and different activities, I would sure like their motor pathways are probably a little bit more in tune with developing that myelin sheath that kind of helps improve like the firing or signaling, and kind of just make those patterns more, I guess, adaptable. But I don't think that they would just be as easily they won't as easily just do something out of a drop of a hat without having done it before. But I think they
yeah,
probably pick it up a lot quicker.
that's interesting. I didn't really have a like a motive for asking that, but as you're saying that, I'm what I'm hearing is that that athlete would learn a new skill better. Like
Hmm.
if they're running around doing all these different things, when it's time to learn how to hinge properly, or it's hey, change this in your batting stance, or move like this when you throw, that athlete would learn it faster and have like a better base and a capacity to pick it up. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, because I feel like in some capacity they would have done those movements, but probably not to the, I guess, extent that we would have them do it in the weight room. Like they've probably done some sort of a lunge or some sort of a hinge or something along those lines where their body's been in that similar position in space to where it's not like a completely foreign idea, uh, but something that they can now put like, okay, this is a lunge, this is where I'm supposed to be, and then they start to kind of hone in on those direct movements and like in understanding what their body's doing in space. Just repetitive motion, repetitive repetitions.
Sure. It's like a paradox, the whole like, should I, from a parent standpoint, should I specialize my
Mm.
son or daughter early or not? And if you have the kid who's only ever gone to the gym and has only ever gone to the hitting lesson, with the amount of time it takes for them to learn how to hinge properly or how to control a forward movement or how to maintain like equilibrium as they're moving, it's like, man, like we've spent the last 3 or 4 years trying to get him to learn this. Like he would have never had a chance if we didn't do hitting lessons all, for the last 3 years. But like
Hmm.
what I'm hearing from this is, well, maybe if they had just been playing like football or soccer or basketball or something else those last 3 years, and then they go to a hitting lesson in year five, they'll be behind, but they'll learn it pretty quick, and they might then surpass the other one.
Yeah, I think so too. I honestly like from the psychological side of things too. I feel like obviously you're less subject to burnout when you spend half the time, like even from that component, but then also as well as like the coaches that you work with in football are cueing not the same but similar positions that you might be cueing in basketball as far as like getting to certain positions, and then it's not only are they not strength coaches but still cueing what a hinge is and like a 3-point stance or how they can kind of correct like coordinate their bodies in these positions, but they're getting cued by three different people or coaches, which maybe it might not stick or resonate with an athlete from one point of view or cue, but then perhaps from another coach, you might have a better or different way of getting a point across that might just end up making more sense to an athlete.
It also makes, like, honestly, I just, it makes my job easier. If I'm hitting with a kid that like plays hockey or does some other sport, like I've done lessons with kids that have training catchers, and they're trying to find a good secondary position, and we talk about like a 3-point stance or a 2-point stance in football, and like how you get to there. All right, now let's move from that to like a catcher's secondary position, like just using movements that are familiar to them to kind of get them to what we need to do in baseball. And just talking about concepts of leverage and being and You can't reference what it's like to try to tackle somebody if a kid doesn't play football, whereas
Hmm.
like when you talk, they might not even necessarily understand in the moment what you're trying to get to, but I feel like they'll get to it eventually. I just try to draw on those connections, and I find that guys that play multiple sports kind of understand that a little bit better, you know.
For sure. Because I feel like it's also kind of coaching with analogies and using uh, like that external language a bit more, where if they have a broader foundation of movement outside of just one sport, that you can draw from different experiences as of part of their physical development to kind of cue from and perhaps get them in that mental space to move in a specific way that they can tie that to a different sport or tie that to a different drill just based off of their foundational athletic, I guess, knowledge or movement competencies.
Yeah, and I think the from the parents' perspective, there's just a lot of we've talked about this before on here. There's just a lot of pressure for these parents to, I guess, quote unquote, get it right for their kid because they see they'll pull up for a 12U tournament and watch this kid who looks like a super athlete, and they think, like Kyle said, all right, I need to freaking pour all my money into hitting lessons and fielding lessons, and again, which I don't think are gonna hurt the kid. But at the end of the day, it's like, okay, that kid that you were watching that's making all these plays, that kid's playing basketball and then he's playing football and then he might have just rolled up to the field and played baseball that day and then he's probably going to go hang out at the beach and play some beach volleyball or something like that. Oh, we just lost Kyle. Kyle's back.
Got him.
On my back, I don't know what's been going on. My Wi-Fi normally isn't an issue, but I'm thinking because everyone's home from work at this time that they're all trying to use it. So I switched to my hotspot from the iPad, which fixed it, and then I just disappeared. But you guys hear me?
You're back.
I'm good.
Yeah, I could hear
Gotcha.
you. I could see you. You're a little pixelated. You
Yikes.
look like a early 2000s Lara Croft Tomb Raider video game, but
But
Oh man.
Dwayne, I didn't hear the last thing you said, so this might be slightly reverting. But what Zach was talking about earlier about getting cued kind of the same thing from different coaches and all that, and having more of like an external environment, creating some good positions where, and this is something that you and I have done with catchers, is guys uh, will throw med balls at them, or we'll have them just like toss a med ball at them, pick it up, and like go to like shot put, throw it back, and all of it, like they can stand up a little bit, they just like catch the ball and throw it back, and all of a sudden their footwork is perfect. They rotate well with their hips first. They set a good foundation. If they don't, they feel it immediately, and then you're like, hey, like what that feel like? I was like tense in my upper body, and then you're telling them like, okay, like keep your weight on your back foot more, or they connect to the ground longer, and then push them there, and they get one good. And you're like, how'd that feel? They're like, yeah, and like they're passing the eye test, and then you take the same kid and you put a glove in their hand and you have them squat down in a catcher position and you say, okay, throw to second, and it's like they've never moved athletically before. Um,
it's so hilarious, dude. It really is.
Hmm. That's funny.
I think that's my. I think that's why I've been just a fan of med ball work in general. Is because it's similar enough where like whether it's hitting or throwing, like you need to be. Um, it's good to have a connection with the ground, whatever that orientation is. You need to use the center of your body to rotate approximately first, and you need to have good decel and like all the things, right? But so it's similar in terms of what needs to happen, but it's disconnected enough where the athlete like breaks away from the prior like ingrained skill habit that they've had, which is often poor from the baseball movement, and then you could almost like restart from that spot.
For sure.
Yeah, I feel like I've implemented, like Kyle's definitely thrown a couple things my way as far as drill work is concerned with some of my athletes that I've been training, and I brought it even to the catchers over at St. Joe's this year, the college that I'm at, and it's it's like shocking, and we even laugh about it in the moment. Like I'm just having kids like run around and do jump throws and all this shit, and then it's like, all right, throw you behind the plate, and you look like you're trying to push the ball over to second base. But it's fun because you can then just get a little bit more creative with it. It kind of takes the I guess I don't know if like anxiety around it is the right word, because some guys get a little bit touchy feely with the throw, because throwing is like, I mean, we could go down a complete rabbit hole and talk about like the yips and everything with that shit, but it's like you get them out from behind the plate, you put them over at shortstop in their catcher's gear, and you tell them just to like slide around and catch and throw the ball all over the place, and it's like, holy shit, you look good. And then you put them behind the plate, and it's like you might as well try throwing lefty or something like that. But it's just
Yeah,
so funny how much, and you know what, I because again, as somebody who doesn't have the background of like strength and conditioning or movement, and been studying all the kinds of things that you have and that Kyle has, it's when I first started doing instruction work and coaching, it's so like this has to move like this, and then you're like, all right, well, why? And then it's like, but if I have you shuffle into your swing for whatever reason, like it looks better. If I have you like try to hold your foot in the air for as long as possible, then like come down and try to move in the right order, like it looks better. So when they're in that comfortable mindset and they're able to be a little bit more creative, and then we kind of use other movements to help us bring us to a better swing, I feel like it's been way more productive. And I'm glad that I get to talk with people like yourself, and I'm glad that I get to learn from you guys, and because it you do see the difference, and then they become so much more interested and like, I guess, responsible, I guess, for what it is that they're trying to do.
for sure. I think the interesting thing too is there's obviously previous coaches and previous cues and previous things that they may have learned that definitely drives them to do what they're currently doing behind the plate or with the swing. But I guess the thing that a med ball can do is it removes a lot of those preconceived ideas or notions of what they're trying to do with their hand or with their bat. And it's like you're just gonna throw this as hard as you can, and that's kind of all your goal is. And then your body will self-organize more or less with what's provided with the resistance of the ball or the activity you're trying to complete, and then kind of almost filters out a lot of those coaching cues that may have been maybe not misguided, but just maybe misunderstood from a specific player, or maybe they saw something on Instagram, which is probably very possible, but a lot of that kind of comes into it.
Zach, I've always appreciated your approach to a lot of this because obviously, I mean, look at you. You like to lift weights, and it's important that the players do that. But um, so obviously, from the like building the engine, quote unquote, like there's the hardcore like innate strength coach there. But you'll also, um, I haven't met someone that views making skill adaptations, whether it's trying to move a certain way when in the swing or pitchers, or have guys make adjustments with their running, where you will tie in um, constraint work in the gym. And I'll let you kind of open up what that might look like. But you've taken we're going to make the skill adaptation. I understand it enough because I used to play, and I know what needs to happen from an adaptation standpoint. But the blending it to go from the gym closer to the cage or closer to the mound, from the strength coach perspective, talking just enough about skill work, but not like crossing the line and trying to just be another hitting coach and tell them what they should do with their hands or whatever. Um, can you, whatever's more comfortable, can you explain how you think about that, or maybe an easier way to just talk about how you've developed that over time?
Yeah, so I think like you said, having like a background in the sport definitely helps in understanding the movements. But as we said before too, is just how technical baseball is, and obviously I feel like sometimes S&C can lose some merit in the previous years or so is because of how um, I guess unidimensional it might appear on like a paper to those that are trying to play baseball, but understanding just how technical the sport is and just how important certain key positions are. There's definitely a proponent of kinetics and the force applied to the ground that's involved with baseball, but there's just as evenly, if not similar importance in the kinematics. So it's like what joint positions are there being um, Like what key joint positions are there? What key joint range of motions are there? Um, what would happen if certain joints have limitations? What would happen if they're hypermobile versus immobile? I think a lot of that gets um, maybe forgotten in some programs, but I feel like understanding just how complex this sport is and just how much, uh, I guess, rotation and how much with pitchers specifically is a whole other rabbit hole. But it's just a whole lot of different things to look at, and I think that's something that we're trying to spend more time on is with a lot of the like the motion capture and the biomechanics that's coming out and servicing with baseball and how readily available it is now to look at some more of those 3D renderings of the body with some markerless motion capture. I think that opens up a brand new realm of just how important range of motion, like active range of motion is. And like obviously the engine, the kinetics, all that stuff's gonna still be a key focal point as to what we're doing. But then to say we can deadlift 575 pounds, but now they can't rotate because their erectors are super developed and they're like multifidus and all that kind of stuff just won't let them rotate their spine, then okay, we got someone that can lift your 2x4s from your truck to the house for your construction job, but like it's not going to be as applicable to being able to put up numbers on the field. So understanding what the key positions that we're trying to achieve for what the swing is and what is important for the swing to be successful, then how we can develop that engine while also maintaining that window is what I call it. It's like a window of opportunity for being able to express that kinetic output within the demands of the movement of the sport.
Like, what does that look like from when, like, on one end of the spectrum, you're trying to improve their active range of motion. You just want guys to move better. It's like if only he could get into this position and rotate from it, then he'd be great. On the other end of the spectrum, like you talked about, like yeah, he moves okay, but the problem is he can't swing hard and he's just physically underdeveloped. Like there's a spectrum there. Um, what are some things you look for um, that maybe are more applicable for like a college coach or a parent of an amateur player? Like, what are some things you look for where you're starting to say he might be getting too strong and too stiff, or not spending enough time on mobility, or like start with that?
Yeah, I think if kind of breaking it down by kind of just some of our, I guess, S&C pillars, but honestly, we want to move well, and that's kind of our setup into everything else because if you don't have the capacity to move with weight, then obviously we'll end up making some compensations, which will probably limit some sporting output if we can't RDL without trunk flexion or spinal flexion. We could end up causing a little bit poor disconnect between what actually is a hip flexion movement versus a spinal movement, and then end up creating some more tightness in our spine, which will inhibit some of our rotational capacities. But first and foremost, developing the movement patterns that are important for lifting, but then obviously important for translating to sport. Um, and obviously developing strength. We have our KPIs as far as what we see as important for on-field performance via force plate, via conventional 3 rep max deadlift, stuff like that. Uh, but then understanding how we can apply load and control load via eccentric and concentric movements. Obviously, it's important to have the engine to drive the concentric output, but can they also withstand that same or similar force in like a negative or eccentric fashion? Obviously, because now we have to move our body and control our body through that neuromuscular connection through different joint positions. Um, but then obviously maintaining that same movement integrity of what we talked about by improving their squat, their hinge, their brace, their pull, their push. But then I think one of the important things to understand too is just how asymmetrical the sport is. So like there's a lot of important postural things that we can look at as far as if there's anterior pelvic tilt or upper lower cross syndrome. Things like that are pretty common in not only today's adult, but then also in just kids, just from texting and sitting on their phone and having slouched shoulders and sitting for so long and having that anterior pelvic tilt. Like there's definitely a lot of asymmetries that can inhibit a lot of key positions we're trying to achieve. And a lot of that obviously is a function of just day-to-day life, but emphasizing a little bit more of just like readiness and preparation and activation prior to activities to ensure like we're in like a as neutral position as we can be prior to any sort of asymmetries that might have created long-term uh, adaptations that are not favorable to performance. So there's a billion different ways we can go with that, but those are my biggest ones.
Yeah, I'm that all that stuff definitely tracks and makes sense. I mean, I just think if you're looking at the amateur baseball player and what it is that they're not getting enough of, because I think, even 10, 15 years ago, it's just get in the gym, and then they're thinking, I think what any other stereotypical go to the gym workouts look like is, training the two muscle groups this day, this day, this day, training legs once a week, and then kind of wash, rinse, repeat into the following weeks. And then, like you said, I think what I've experienced personally and with teammates and kids that I've coached is things that you've mentioned too, like a lot of that back tightness, back stiffness, some oblique injuries here and there, and a lot of like scapular injuries too. But if you're just saying plainly to like the amateur, like parent of an amateur kid, like what is it that they should be doing, like what like, because I don't know. Like, we're talking to like a broad audience. Some people might have access to some sort of strength and conditioning program. So like I know a number of programs that exist on Long Island, but there could be a million different variables that either help people access things that you're describing, or there could be variables that keep them from accessing that. So like, are there things on social media that are good? Are there basic activities? Like, is part of the answer like, hey, play multiple sports and get outside more? Like, what are some of those things that you think that these, amateur guys can get out there and do to help them with this?
Yeah, I think probably one of the best things is just to put a basketball hoop over your garage. I think that's part of it. Uh, I think things like that kind of get you outside, and especially basketball because it's like a reaching sport. So as far as like the opposite of what we do from a baseball side of things, which is very much pulling and rounding, having some more reaching involved would end up being a little bit better. But then also it's a lot of plyometrics, so it improves a little bit of like this ground reaction force. But as far as just like a younger kid learning to develop, like first and foremost is the developmental movement patterns are the most important thing. We run into kids all the time that don't necessarily know how to do all these things very well, and it sets them back as far as where their ceiling is. We can develop, you can put strength on bad movement, but then it just leads to injury or at some point some chronic issues. But once you have the foundation set of how to move correctly, it opens up a lot more doors and improves your ceiling that much higher whenever you can safely put on 405 on your back without having to worry about your knees caving in or your back rounding or things like that. And it just improves the foundation and the successful continuation of just developing an athlete over time. Because it really sets you up for failure whenever you have to get to a certain level and then end up hitting pause because now we reached the ceiling of what we can possibly do with what we've developed, but now we have to go back and remap a few things because we just haven't developed those movement properties the way we want, which in general could have some ties to some on-field performance as well. But yeah, I think there's just too much of an upside to just spend time working on those foundational movements and really ironing those out before getting too deep into the weeds as far as what specialized or specific baseball training can provide for you.
Yeah, because I see it. I do dozens of lessons, and you see, like, again, I can just see that this guy can't fucking move. You know what I mean? Like, I'm
Yeah.
like, this guy just can't move, and the parent. And the reason, again, why I'm asking you is just because I know that there are people that are going to listen to this that they like they'll come to me and they're talking about, hey, this is what's going on with Johnny's hands. His hands are doing this. His hands are doing this. He's dropping his bat. He's dropping his shoulder. He's dropping his shoulder. And I'm like, dude, like, your boy can't move. Your kid can't move, like, at all. Like, what is he doing? What does he do on a daily basis? Like, it's just, is he a good runner? Like, I'll ask questions like that, and they look at me like I have six heads. Like, does he play another sport? What's he doing in the winter? What's he doing over the summer when he's not on a baseball field? Those kinds of things. And it's frankly, it's like I get the opposite where it's I haven't seen this kid in 6 months because he just did this sport, and now he's coming back around baseball season, and there's two such different sides where it's like, oh my God, you're so far behind on your baseball training. Whereas I find those kids to pick it up quicker, to get back into it a little bit quicker than somebody who it's like we've hit a wall in your development for your swing because it's like there's such a limitation on athletics. And for me personally, like I can't sit there and prescribe movements to them. I'm not qualified to do that. But you know what I will say is talking about just doing other sports, being involved in other athletics. Like I notice a lot of like wrestlers, they do pretty well. You know, like wrestlers do pretty well in regards to baseball movements. And same thing can be said for like basketball and stuff. I never would have learned how to freaking run. I ran like I had a fucking piano on my back until I started playing football and basketball. You know, just because from coaching through football helped me run better. You know, and then through the maturation process as well, I just became stronger and became a pretty good runner. So it's just I'm trying to figure out ways where we can, you know, talk about like how can we, you know, make these freaking kids a little bit more athletic because damn, it's bad sometimes.
Well, I think without going down too far of a tangent, I think one of the things that's tough is also how like all the NIL and all that money in college is going to end up making things worse before they get better because now there's more of an incentive like, hey, instead of making money when you're 18, now you can make money when you're 16. I'm sorry, not 18, but 21. Now you can make money when you're 18 going into college. And now that deadline of you need to be the best athlete now moves up 3 to 4 years because now there's $1 million on the line before you get to college. And it kind of just dissuades a lot of what's necessary as far as player development or athlete development.
Is it just hard for people to trust that? You know what I mean?
I
Like
Yeah,
because of that, because of the money that's kind of attached to those things.
I would say so. I think so, just because I think golf is kind of poster child to early specialization quite a bit as far as just how you can swing a golf club till you're from your six till when you're off the tour and the senior tour or whatever, and make plenty of money. So I think and they don't have to be too athletic. Like their sport isn't running unless you're Tony Finau. But anyway, and there's not much component to their sport aside from just swinging a club. So I get uh, a little bit tied up with that. Uh, I mean, I get it. If it works out, it works out for the best. But then at the same time, it does away with a lot of the development of different physical characteristics that are necessary for sport.
I think it has caused such a big gap in the skill of the players too. Something that I've talked about on here a couple times. Whereas I think if I go back to when I was a kid, there was such a big middle of the pack as far as the players. Like nowadays, I feel like the best player is so much better than when I was playing, but the worst player is like would not have been playing baseball by the time they were probably 13 because they would have just been cut or something like that, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that what you're saying, and I've thought about these things too, and it makes sense. But I guess you know, kind of what you're shedding light on here today has it just makes complete sense why I see that.
Yeah, it's a tough, like inevitable truth as far as just like if you don't do it, you get left behind. But then at the end of the day, you might end up having the best ceiling for the specific sport because you've developed so many necessary qualities that are just not specific to baseball yet. But in 2 to 3 years come time, who knows if you're going to be better than the person that that five chip recruit or whatever.
I think it comes down from a parenting and even just a coaching and advisor of kids at that like high school, middle school, high school range is like what's the goal like for them playing? Why are we doing this? And I think at the forefront, as you bring up, I almost feel like if you've got a 4-year old, 5-year old, 6-year old that's starting to play t-ball, it's almost like, well, if he gets good at this, then there's a prize at the end. And it used to be a college scholarship. I won't have to pay for college from the parent standpoint. And now it's like, well, if he gets pretty good at this, like he's going to be making money, and all this will have a good return on investment. And it's the like, what are we going to achieve? What are we going to acquire from playing? But I think like the real reason that sports is such a good thing is it teaches discipline. You have to work through failure. You have to work in a team setting. You have to um, compete and continue to try to figure out how to get better at something, or how to figure out how to have a better result at something when you're struggling. And then just to go through the experience, and then also the long-term athletic development as you're talking about. I think when you keep those at the forefront, then you find yourself like, no, keep playing basketball. He likes it. And then you find yourself like when you're deciding, I think it's time for him to get more serious in the gym. You're not, maybe you take your kid to go to Planet Fitness or something with you, and like that's step one, sure. But then at some point you're looking for a strength coach, and you're now looking for someone that's saying things along the same lines that you're saying, where they're talking about, is he moving well? I want to make sure that he knows how to handle this pattern before I put weight on him. Or maybe he's pretty athletic, but he's hypermobile, so we actually want to stiffen him up a little bit and add some load, and here's why. And it becomes much more of a holistic view. Um, and I think in my experience, and I think Dwayne could say the same, that the parents that have this sort of view, that sort of like quote unquote get it, their kids end up doing well in the end, and then they end up having a good experience from like socially, from a um, like overall college experience, athletic experience. Um, but it's just like it's not advertised, it's not sold. Um, no, there's my rant, but
No, yeah. No, you're right. Because I feel like a lot of it too. Like you look at college athletes that get recruited by these other jobs once they finish sports. Like a lot of employers really like to work with former athletes because of their ability to work within team settings, and they're comfortable around a group of people, and they're not afraid to kind of voice their opinion because of their experience with sports. So I think that there's definitely positives with networking in other sports away from just the physical development side of things, because you end up dealing with different types of people. You deal with different types of situations and different scenarios you might not be accustomed to if you come up with just being at the ballpark or the batting cage, and you're only really kind of limiting yourself to one or two brands of people that you can't really take to work outside of baseball or outside of sport once you kind of get down that road.
Yeah, also it's just fucking dope to be in good shape, man. Like I say that to our guys all the time, like we'll get such a mixed bag at the Division 3 level. You'll get some guys that come in, they know how to work out, or they are really athletic, and you get some guys that don't. And when you're having conversations with those kinds of guys, and we're thankfully, I think we're at a good place where our head coach is the guy is he's very smart. He lives it too. He's probably the most jacked 50-year-old dude I know, and like takes good care of himself. Like he's a very holistic approach to his own personal health. So it's very easy to talk to these guys about that. And when I talk to them and get in their ear about this stuff, I'm like, if you are able to build a foundation for yourself, or even if you're starting from scratch at 18 years old, or you're starting with minimal experience, you're just a regular, I go to the gym type guy. If you can implement some more movement stuff, get your body feeling a little bit better, you're setting yourself up to do that for the rest of your life. You're creating momentum for yourself to live a healthier existence, because it's probably a hell of a lot harder to start doing this stuff when you're 30 and then 40 and then 50. And if you're starting this stuff at 18 and you're disciplined enough to follow through with that stuff, you're probably somebody that I would want to work for me, because you have that discipline to do something that's difficult. And then from a physical standpoint, you're just going to feel better. You're probably going to treat the people in your life a little bit better because you do feel better, and you'll just be a better worker. So I think that having conversations like this are so key. And I'm sure you've had, just by listening to you, dude, you're very well spoken, and you talk about these things in such a passionate way, which I love doing this and having conversations with you about this stuff. It's fun. But I think if we can just have more conversations with people because it's not really that intimidating, and it's actually exciting, and it can help you feel better. And then, you know what, if you get pretty good at this stuff, maybe those other things do happen too, like in the form of these NIL or these scholarships or whatever, or maybe you just have a better, if you're a Division III baseball player or a high school baseball player, or even if you are a high level college baseball player, like maybe you just have a career that's, God willing, like injury free, and it's successful, and then maybe you get an opportunity to do something else. But you don't know until you start, I guess, exposing yourself to these kinds of things.
Mhm.
And I guess with that being said, how would you go about like getting some exposure into S&C if you're somebody who doesn't, like, what are some good ways to get started into like exposing yourself into the language? Is there anything you'd recommend, like reading? Are there good like pages online to read? Like what would your advice be to those
Oh.
people?
Well, first and foremost, I
Listen to
know.
this podcast. I know you're going to say that. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, exactly. First and foremost, tune in. Uh, but no, I think one of the biggest, it's one of the most influential people was like my high school strength coach, who was obviously the first person that back then I worked out because the team worked out. It wasn't like I was getting better at it, obviously, because I was diligent with it. I was disciplined about it, but I was getting better at it. It wasn't really something I wanted to do on in excess because it was just like something I did to play sports. Um, but going into my freshman year at college, like I ended up getting really into it because of the our strength coach at the time was very intelligent, helped out a lot with what we were doing, and you start seeing a lot more of the progress and the development and the outputs that you can have on whatever your sport is. So like for me personally, I find it very impactful to work with whoever, if you're in high school, to work with your strength conditioning coach. And like in middle school, I know that like their PE coaches have their own curriculum they have to do as far as what they're supposed to do. But as far as literature, I know Michael Boyle has very good book going over like just the basics of movement and like the key patterns of moving, and then obviously progressing those movement patterns with load and how you can progress them over time. I got a few papers saved on my computer I can definitely share with you as far as like long-term athletic development and like different strategies. But the main, I guess the main, without getting too deep into the weeds, the main like takeaway from obviously is like the pushing and the pull, the squat, the hinge, the lunge, but then like the brace. One of the other big things is maintaining like the neutral pelvic position with a stacked rib cage is huge. Um, because that's when you end up noticing a lot of like those SARS fractures with our younger athletes, from especially with rotating athletes. So improving like that intra-abdominal pressure and kind of maintaining that stacked rib cage with those movements will make sure that we're not doubling up too much with those fractures in our spine. But man, I have to dive deeper into that to give more resources. But I know Michael Boyle was someone that really did a good job. That was one of the first books that I read going into as a grad assistant, as far as just understanding a little bit more of how to program things. So I know if I were a player, I would definitely look at him as a start to see what kind of stuff I can do better.
And so I mean, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but your experience with some quality strength coaches kind of inspired you to get into what you're doing now. Like, would you say?
Yeah. So I was at Texas Tech my freshman year. Um, don't ask me his name. I forgot. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. But I ended up going to junior college after my freshman year at Tech. And at that point, I was pretty pot committed to training because I saw what it did. And so for the 2 years that I was in junior college, I lifted like almost every day, if not every other day. Um, and we had like all of our team in there. We had like a free access to a gym because one of our buddies on the team's dad owned a gym down the road. So we had a 24-hour pass to go in and just throw weight around. So we did that. Um, and going into college at Wichita State, different view of lifting from our strength coach there, but he was impactful. A little more bodybuilding type. Um, but then at that point, I got my grad assistantship there. Was able to put some of these things I fell in love with, researching and doing all that stuff into my own kind of program, and that's kind of where it took off. Was obviously if you're passionate about something, you kind of don't feel like it's a burden to learn more about it. So like it's my, I guess my education journey started in junior college, where I kind of started reading more and more and more. Like the bodybuilding.com website was like the most visited website on my phone a lot of times. But that's just how it goes.
Dude, are you gonna write any books? Can you just say it here if you're ever gonna write any books so we could plug that when that fucking comes out? I don't know, man. It sounds like, again, like I talk to Kyle a lot. That's just which is like having a fucking thesaurus on like anything.
Yeah.
But again, like somebody like yourself too, just listening to you talk is like it's nice, and I feel like you explain this stuff well, you articulate yourself very well. Like, are you ever gonna write a book on these things? I'm just curious. I know it's kind of like off cuff, but
I don't know. I don't think of myself as someone that might be able to write a book. I like just reading them. Maybe at some point when I feel like I know what I'm talking about, but
get a little
when,
bit gray. Maybe get a little gray
yeah,
beard
get
action.
a
Then
little
maybe
gray in
you
there.
crack into the books a little bit.
For sure, for sure. There's still plenty to read before I know if I have enough to put pen to paper.
That'd be dope. I mean,
Yeah.
I like talking to people, like I said earlier, like yourself, who are passionate about these things, and I think that oftentimes when you're sitting there talking to somebody that's like, I could never do that, it's like that guy should fucking write a book. You know what I mean? Because it's just the passion, dude. You can't replace that stuff, and it's cool that you get to work with. I mean, like you said before, you're coordinating, working with people who are working with other people, and it's cool to know that there are people like you out there helping spread the good word and helping these athletes. It's cool.
Oh, thank you.
Zach, something I'm curious about. You said you feel like you don't have a lot of this figured out yet, but you like reading and you're curious about some different things. What are some non like immediate strength coach things that you're interested in learning about or that you've been um I guess
Uh,
curious about in like recent years? Doesn't have to be. I know it's the season where
yeah.
all it's hard to learn during the
Yeah.
season, but
Um, so the most recent book that I've been reading, oh shoot, I can't remember the name of it. It was an old leadership book that actually my dad bought me. Um, but yeah, it was one of those things where I was like coming into a leadership role, and I was like, probably should spend more time reading about this instead of like French contrast or something, and see how it can apply to staff members. But uh, so I started reading more about that. Something that's been on like the wish list, as far as if I can just download it from a computer into my brain so I knew how to do it, would be like just coding and writing script in R. I feel like that's the future. And I think the biggest thing with strength conditioning is you have to be able to prove the change and prove your worth to those that don't necessarily know what you're doing. So the more you
that's
have the
such a
data
I'm
available,
gonna I want to hit on
yeah,
the leadership part too, but the
yeah,
having to prove why something's working is such a it's a hairy thing because obviously you want to be able to show why something's getting better, right, or not,
mm,
so you can course correct. Um, but at the same time, it is so easy to look at something and be like, "Hey, look, it's getting better," or "It's getting more," um, and it could also be hard to flag like whether or not something is actually getting worse, and you might not see it. So with um, what are your to turn this into a question? what are your what are some of the things that you're when you say you want to code or you want to be able to dive in and look for some different things? What are some of the things you're curious about being able to show that might not be obvious? So like if you go to a decent if you go to a private facility that's got even a little bit of a tech, they'll be able to measure how fast you can move a certain weight, or maybe they'll have you jump on a force plate and tell you something about it, or they'll have you run like some basic stuff. Um, but as obviously you're well aware, just because you jumped higher and you can move 300 pounds faster, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're better or safer throwing a baseball. So what are some things you're curious about with that?
yeah. So I actually had a few different hypothesi uh, this spring training, as far as how we can measure implements against others. So like how can we select different variables of the swing that we know are like the most important metrics that can, like, aside from like barrel velocity or exit velocity, what are some kinematic variables that we can determine are pretty uh, indicative of whether or not they're going to have a fast swing, but more from like a variable of like the lower half or like the hips. Like, is it pelvic rotation velocity? Is it like knee angular velocity or whatever that might be? And then how can we tie that to some more of a specific weight room metric that obviously if it's not going to be a one-to-one or if it's not going to be as close to something that we need to put too much of our stock in, then obviously it's not worth it. But trying to find different variables that aren't as, um, I guess, skill dependent to see like, because obviously you take some of the best hitters, perhaps they don't rotate the fastest or perhaps they don't have those specific makeups that require them to hit the ball very far, very hard, or whatever. But they have a really good proponent of like bat to ball. But then there's all those guys that can rotate really fast, but just what is there another outlier in their development that's limiting them from being able to put the barrel on the ball? Um, so trying to take some of like the sporting out of like assessing this player's ability, and then determining whether or not we have the right or the avail or the possibility of making those changes or understanding how we can better track that change based off of the work they do with us. So to me, it's just more or less kind of compare different variables to see if there's a strong enough suggestion to draw a correlation. Um, and that also, sidebar of that is understanding statistics a bit better would help a lot better as well. So that's another thing that I'm trying to start to dive more into is some more deep, statistical analysis stuff. Because I think I mean, every research paper you read, I've taken a few courses about as far as understanding what's a good paper, what's a bad paper, because obviously there's different limitations in research based off of the population size and the different tests they run. So understanding, being able to vet those out myself would be great. But yeah, there's plenty that I can do. But yeah, as far as what we're trying to learn from some of the stuff with like coding, it's just trying to expand the horizon or the umbrella of performance and then how we can tie performance to training. Not necessarily only trying to prove the relevance or to prove the progress of a player, but then also trying to prove the relevance of why training is important, and how it can create change of a significant metric from a performance outcome, is more or less the curiosity side of it.
Yeah, I think I'd imagine that a large percentage of the front offices in pro baseball are trying to figure out a way how to code the swing or
Yeah.
the pitching motion. Like, hey, everyone gets their back hip at certain position and they rotate at a certain speed and you need this. They'll give it a new stick called like hip factor Y. Like you need it above 3 in order to make it to the big leagues. No one's there unless they have, and like that's the approach. But I tend to think I'm skeptical with that. I think that approach is a bit outdated. I tend to think it's more of better understanding why outliers work,
Hmm.
or not. I think that's so then you can eventually specialize to the player. Like why are Mookie Betts and Shohei Ohtani? Well, let's for argument's sake, they're both just as good as hitters, but they're nothing alike.
Hmm.
Like you can't tell me that they both have like the right knee position, or they tell them that they
Yeah.
have the right spine position because they load opposite. Shohei will rotate inwards and have more of a like a counter rotation and then swing open and arch back, and Mookie will barely coil in his load. One hits the ball 120 miles an hour, and the other hits the ball 106. They both hit homers, so it's like I think having it's just nuanced.
No, but well, I think you're right though, because there is no one recipe to make the best pie. I feel like there's a bunch of different great pies out there, but then also at the end of the day too, it's like I don't want to say bucket because I feel like it's a buzzword now, but like there's different movement profiles that are still different within that bucket. But then I feel like the more you understand what different, I guess, phenotypes are as far as what the swing is constructed into or what they're constructed into each of their swings, um, gives you a little bit more insight. Like you said, like the one athlete that might need more tension in their upper body, or the one athlete that's obviously too stiff, or the one athlete who's just a bag of milk, or etc. You can go on and on as far as like where these guys might fit. It gives you just a little bit more direction. Like if we knew how to like what these players are, what their limitations are, like based off of what we can support, then it might give them like, okay, I get a little decision tree, which obviously decision tree has what it is, but can point you in the right direction and then can confirm or reject a little bit more of your hypothesis if it ends up stemming out. But no, I think you're right. It's not going to be an n=1 for everybody because obviously there's many different ways to make the pie.
But every pie does have crust. You know what I mean? So there's got to be something there. I think you guys are talking about different guys move, and I can't remember when it was or who was doing it, which team did it, but there was like a game where they were showing where the guys were striding, and I was like so happy to see that because when you're working in cages and you're seeing all hitting gurus out there and shit, it's like you need to stand here, you need to stride here. If you stride like this, no good. If you stride like that, no good. And I'm like, I don't know. The past like couple of years for me, especially, I've seen a lot of good hitters, a lot of bad hitters, and like you guys both said, there's not one way. There's not one type of pie. There's not one way to make a pie and everything. But I've seen guys like have that scissor pattern when they turn. I've seen guys step close, step open, and all have success. And I was just so happy to see something like that. I know that's a little bit strayed from what you guys are talking about, but I just feel I was happy to see that was put on the big stage. Seeing all those little like
well, I mean,
step
that's the
patterns
thing you
and
want to
stuff.
understand is because if you take the guy that scissors and has been doing it since he's 8 and you have him hit like Bo Bichette, then like, well, you just ruined him. So like you can't. That's the problem with the whole Instagram battles that go on that I'm not aware of. But it's like, oh, you have to. Jose Bautista. This was the thing when we were playing in college around that age. It's like Joey Bats, Jose Bautista hits 50 homers. He sucks with I think it was the Pirates. He goes to Toronto, works with the hitting guy, whoever that was, and now he hits 50 homers. So every kid needs to have a leg kick and create max hip shoulder separation so they can hit tanks. And then
Yeah, it's the same thing with Donaldson. Yeah.
yeah, it was and like okay, and then then you have Judge. Now everyone's got to swing like Judge, and then wait for your next. I'm surprised more people don't want to hit like Shohei, but like you got all this like who's the best? Let's copy him, without taking into consideration like, well, what is the shape of the thing that's swinging the bat? Like what's that like? So I think that's
Hey,
that's like a obviously we could talk about like a good hitting coach or good pitching coach and having depth of understanding and all that, but then working with a strength coach or physical therapist or whoever else that also has a similar obviously they're going to know their field, but they have a similar appreciation for what's going on in the sport. Like when you get people like that together, it's you get something really special.
Does that happen? I mean, like, it's kind of a dumb question, but like, in your guys' experience, is it like you're seeing the way a certain guy's swinging, and just to use something simple to grasp onto for my pea-sized brain, but when you're seeing a guy that might have certain limitations in the way that they move, have you like can you make a suggestion to a hitting coach and say this guy might benefit from being closed, this guy might benefit from striding open or making certain kinds of movements? Like is that something that's like part of what you do?
we've made a few recommendations with some like just screening tools to look at some like hip orientation and look at some possible like soft tissue limitations to see if there's one setup that might better prefer or one setup that might be more successful than another, just based off of what like injury history or setup like hip orientation might suggest, but then also kind of tailor certain programs around creating a better environment for the player to be successful, dependent on like obviously understanding what phases of the swing there are, and then what like kinematic sequence or kinematic positions they need to be into in order to successfully uh, complete their swing, knowing how our coaches are trying to coach and what the players are trying to achieve. How can we better set them up based off their current status into a position that can better get into those positions.
Because as I'm sitting here listening to you and Kyle riff off these types of things, I'm like, every hitting coach should have some sort of experience with, or some like base level knowledge in these types of movements, these types of patterns, what these movements mean to be able to get in and like help these guys and help optimize their performance. Because you might not even understand what it is that like they can or cannot do. And if you don't have any knowledge in these kinds of things, I feel like it could just be, you're trying to make a fucking pizza pie with concrete. I don't know. I can't think of anything else right now. But you know what I'm saying? Like, I just
That
feel like,
works.
you know what I'm saying? Like, I just, like, if you don't have this, like, at least some sort of base level knowledge, or at least understand that if this guy's striding this way, but he's still making a movement that quote unquote needs to happen in the swing, like, let's not fuck that up. You know what I mean? Let's stick with that, because I see it happen so much where there's production, there's comfort, there's even some understanding on the player's part where they're like, I do this because it makes sense, it helps me get here, and it's like, no, 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 like you can't do that. That's just wrong, and as we're all talking here, I'm like, every coach needs to get well versed at least in some way in this stuff to help these guys a little bit more.
Well, I think what I agree completely. It's a good question. The answer is yes, it exists. It's not common, even at the highest level, but it exists. But I think what you're alluding to is like you need understanding in some things that are related. You could say the same thing for like mental performance or for eating properly or for leadership quality. Like it's not just hitting, it's not just pitching or whatever, as much as the game would like to say it is. Um, but what you're really circling around is like critical thought. Can you think originally and identify why is something going well, why is it not, what's important, what isn't? Like you could have like a really good sign, a strong predictor of a bad hitting coach is when all your hitters swing the same. Like if you're like, oh, that guy started going to so and so because he's doing that move, or his hands are in that spot, or his foot's pointed a certain way. And just like you could say something similar for a strength coach, like, oh, he got stronger and now he's been just chucking the med ball in the wall as hard as he can, and he's doing run and gun pull downs, and he's got the cable with the special air pressure on the thing set just right, and now he's rotating as fast as he can with a bar in his hand, like, um, and that will work for some people if you're lucky. If your favorite hand position works for the body that you're with, like, great, you just won as the hitting coach. If you have someone that's just a good hitter, they have good eye hand coordination, they recognize pitches well, they compete well, they just need to get a little bit stronger, and you have him rip the Kaiser machine, then great, like, you won. But what about all the players that don't have that combo? um, but I think what and this is my take on it, and Zach, I'll let you comment, of course. But um, ideally, you'd have a hitting coach that is aware of some of these other things, as you're alluding to. You'd have a strength coach that has a good appreciation for obviously their field, but then also has an appreciation for what has to happen, what's important, what's not completely necessary from the skill standpoint. But I think more than anything, rather than saying every hitting coach needs to go and get a bachelor's in movement science, and they need to take the online courses, and they need to know about what hip internal rotation means or not, and whatever. They just need to put the ego aside and be able to share the responsibility of the player with someone else that also cares for the player, and communicate with them professionally.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think that obviously every department coach has an idea, or has a hopefully a better than an idea of what their respective discipline is about as far as the development of the player. And obviously, with the hitting coaches, obviously having their key point of emphasis around hitting, and perhaps there's something a player is struggling with. Instead of trying to force a square peg into a round hole, it's like, hey, this isn't working. Are there other members here that can help isolate what's causing this not to work. Um, and then like becomes more of a collaborative problem solving scenario. To where if it comes up to where it's like, hey, this is just something he can't do, or he would be better in a position like this, or he doesn't have the capacity or the strength to do this just yet. So, like 100%, 100%, it has to be putting the ego on the side and just not really worrying about the answer coming from your mouth, but then just making sure that the right answer gets to the player's ear. It's obviously what's most important.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I think my brain kind of goes to just in general when I think about coaching kids, or sorry, like training kids in a private setting versus coaching them. It always, things work out a little bit better if I'm training an athlete and I know their coach because he can tell me what's going on in game, whereas I'm not with them on a day to day basis. And I feel like when we have a collaborative effort towards making them better, it seems to work. It seems to be more beneficial. So I guess that makes sense. I just feel for like amateur and in what I do, I'm like, you could be giving a kid a lesson or coaching a kid on your team and you might not even know who the hell it is that they're training with. So I guess it's kind of on the part of the instructor like myself or the coaches out there for amateur baseball to, I guess, communicate with the parents or the players and figure out who they're training with and maybe, I guess, like create some sort of network that they could all communicate on. Like I'm trying to like work in my brain how this can happen at the level that I'm working at and the level of a lot of people that'll listen to this. Because obviously, working with you guys, it's you know the strength coaches, you know the hitting coaches, you know the managers, those kinds of things. It's you have access to those people as well as the players. Whereas there's in the private world, obviously, it's kind of tougher to get that. But the ego thing, Kyle, that you bring up, I think is such an important thing because for the private sector, for the amateur baseball players, it is so like that is such a large factor because there might be a little bit more effort involved in like reaching out to these people that are training these amateur athletes, you know?
Yeah, I think to your like, what would that look like in the private setting? A really a way that could work really well is if you have the cages and the gym under the same roof and they're all part of the same program. Where in theory the hitting coach is talking with the strength coach and they're having these conversations all the time because they're sharing the athlete. Um, from a convenience standpoint, I would say it's probable or it's more probable that from the parent's perspective, it's more likely that if the hitting coach is in the same building and has the same boss as the strength coach, then like that's more likely that those conversations between the two. But I could also tell you that a lot of times it's, hey, we've got to get 12 kids through the door in this half hour, and they're going to do through these three drills that are just cookie cutter, and then they're going to go in the gym, and everyone's going to do the same program, and like it's
No,
almost,
that never happens, Kyle. What are you talking about? No.
and it's almost like you're almost worse off, other than the fact that you didn't have to drive from the cage to the gym, which is a big selling point. Um, where if you have a like you said, it's just the lack of ego and like the caring for the player. If you have the hitting coach that hopefully has some background in these sorts of things, you could say the same for pitching, and has some understanding of the body beyond just the foot has to be here because that's what the Grom does. Um, and you have a strength coach that is considering like, okay, how's this kid performing? Is he struggling with certain thing? Am I watching him and making updates to his programming after every couple weeks? And then like you get those two to talk to each other, or and I'm just thinking this now, you can have the parent or even the athlete, if they're old and mature enough, to say, hey, I'm working on this with my hitting coach. Like, is that something we could do here in the gym? Or you could tell the hitting coach, like, hey, and this isn't common, but it would be excellent if the kid was like, hey, I'm talking with my strength coach and he had me move my toes out in the squat because he said my hips work better that way. Like, do you think that affects hitting? Um, Like the player can be the bridge in that sense, um, which I don't think is often thought of.
Pretty wild stuff. It's weird. It's weird. I'd like to see it more. It makes so much sense. It makes so much sense, because I can use myself as an example, just the stride stuff where because of the way that I was taught hitting throughout the years, I'm not going to say it was cookie cutter, but it was like neutral, balanced stance, stride forward, hands, whatever, everything that you guys were told too, I'm sure. Um, and then you start to get into instructing and you try to grab from what made sense to you, but you also at the same time you're like, well, that shit didn't work, that shit didn't make any sense, that kind of stuff. So you get your own flavors. And then when I actually started, I guess, getting exposed to some of the movement stuff that made sense, I'm like, and then talking about like hip inserts and all this shit, I'm like, wow, this makes a lot of sense actually. Why there's not one way to do this, because at the amateur level, it's like this is the way you're supposed to do it. But if you turn on any game from any time period, it's like, no, actually, that guy stands closed and he's hunched over and his head's like this and he's raking, like. So I guess that exposure for me, like for me personally, I see the benefit of it. I'm just trying to figure out ways where we can put that together. But I guess if the three of us could put that together, we'd be making a fucking boatload of money. So we'd just be having the most successful business of all time. So I hope somebody takes our idea and becomes millionaires and at least shouts us out.
Yeah, you get 10%.
uh, I
Well,
love that.
the thing we're talking about exists, and there's people all over the place that are doing it, and there's a
Yeah,
handful
there
of
is.
a handful. There's a laundry list of coaches that have been, I feel like probably more commonly in pro ball, just because the level of player and instruction and in theory quality of work is so much higher in reference to the salary that people eventually say, you know what, like the three of us, like we can do it, and then they start a facility and they go. And it can go really well if it's run appropriately, or it could become, oh shoot, like if I don't have 100 kids in here an hour, then we're not paying bills. So just have them do open angle front toss. Go. That's a whole separate thing. Um, the the concept of ego though, and like letting that go in terms of leadership and coaching and collaboration and all that. Uh, Zach, has that come up in any of the stuff that you've been looking into?
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think one of the most impactful things as far as dealing with, or not dealing, but working with other individuals and upholding a philosophy or creating pillars of which to build a philosophy off of is to be inclusive of the staff members and inclusive of your team of developing that philosophy. Um, but then also like kind of structuring the collaboration a bit to kind of include what research and what um, experience and then what the environment allows to be part of your philosophy, but then obviously having everybody have part of developing the cornerstones of what you all believe, so that way when it comes to blows, when coaches are at the affiliates and they're arguing with a player about getting something done that they need to do, they're not going to be like, screw it, like you don't have to do it, whatever, because obviously if they don't have as much invested into whatever the process might be, then it'll be hard to uphold those pillars of that philosophy. But I think as long as I or other department heads understand like this is not my philosophy, this is our philosophy, and then we can all develop together. All of us can have insight as to what we want to be, um, what we believe in. It kind of holds everybody else accountable to what they believe in essence, is, and it kind of creates better buy-ins with their staff, and then in essence, I would hope kind of helps maintain a level of integrity throughout the organization. Um, just knowing that the staff members are bought in and they're not just doing somebody else's work, but doing part of doing their own work and fulfilling their own work as what they see.
There's a sense of pride that comes along with that when uh,
Mm-hmm.
part of the, I guess, the culture or the philosophy or whatever that, like the unit in your case, the strength coaches come to work with is that like if something's going well, we're going to celebrate it together, and if something's not, then you're more inclined to look for a solution rather than to be like, this isn't working. I knew it. It's because so and so made me do this. I didn't want to do it in the first place. You kind of like you get more skin in the game from all
Yeah.
involved.
But that's a good point too, is like having those conversations. I think that's one of the most empowering things is to have people say no. Or I would rather someone disagree with me than to just like give me vague, vacant stares and bobblehead nods. Um, 'Cause I'd rather have someone be passionate in disagreements than just to be just kind of passive in their approval. Um, because if it's something that they don't believe in, I want to know about it. So that way, if I can educate them or they can educate me as to why it won't work, or I can educate them as to why it will, and then we can come to an agreement or perhaps make some sort of concessions one way or another to where we're both emphatic of what we have established. And then it holds each other accountable. We can hold each other accountable as to what it is because now we both have skin in the game. This is something that we've both done research on, we both attested to via experience or whatever it might be, and we've all collectively decided this is the best route as to what this year is going to look like. But at the end of the day, we know that it only be held to the standard that we provided or we uphold. So I think as long as each member has that same amount of accountability, then it kind of holds that standard among itself.
And it makes working during difficult times easier too, because you have that sense of belonging when you're, I guess, welcomed in that way. Or at least, I mean, I wouldn't even say welcomed, I would just say received in some respectful manner, where they're either disagreeing with you because of, like, from a passionate place or agreeing with you and also curious. Like there is something to be said for somebody who is in a leadership role and is willing to ask questions. It's for somebody like yourself, I'm sure, when you're dealing with hitting coaches or other skill coaches and they're curious about these things, I'm sure it's nice to have those kinds of conversations too.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, to your question earlier, like, does that exist? Can that work? When you were alluding to the different, um, like I guess collaboration. I saw it firsthand when Zach and I were in IE together in 2021. We lived together, and then our pitching coach at the time, who's now our director of pitching, was he ended up joining with us and staying on a portable bed in the living room. Um, he like the two of them, Zach and our now director, would just like we'd be sitting in, coming in, like complaining about the weather or whatever happened with the field or something silly, and then be talking about like where we're getting breakfast in the morning, and then conversations would pop up and inevitably about, hey, I'm trying to get so and so pitcher to do better at X, and like, and then Zach would be like, oh well, I've been doing that in the gym with them, and been thinking about adjusting this, and now the two of them are brainstorming on some different things. So that's that is the golden example.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful, man. I'm jealous of that experience.
But like that also like comes from our director of pitching who's like this the least amount of ego that anybody will ever meet. So he's like one of the best guys to work with because he just wants obviously what's best for the player. If he knows it, great. If he doesn't, he'll find someone that does, and that's just the best part of working with him, especially. And it's finding people like that to work with, or just makes your job a lot more fun and fulfilling as well.
Well, you'd spoken, and Kyle kind of hit on the leadership and being in a position of leadership. I'm sure that's something like a page you've kind of taken out of his book, given your position of leadership now. I guess, like, what have there been instances up until this point in this position of leadership where you've like I guess, gotten that opportunity with somebody who is, I guess, underneath you or younger than you or less experienced? Have you gotten that opportunity to be receptive or to ask those kinds of questions?
Yeah, we actually have an apprentice right now on FCL who's very, very intelligent, and I love like his passion, obviously, as far as like what's involved with the field. Um, but one thing that I feel like we can get better at as like an organization and a department is a little bit more of like the conditioning side of strength and conditioning, like a little bit more understanding how we can have an impact with player energy system development. And so this staff member came from a field-based sport in soccer. And so I told him, I was like, hey, one thing I want you to work on this year with me is to kind of better research, modify, and more or less audit our current systems as to what we do. I want you to like shoot holes in it. I want you to tell me why it's bad, and I want you to provide an answer, and then we can collaborate to see what we can do to better put our position and our organization in a better area moving forward, given that this is your current area of expertise coming from a field-based sport. Having spent most of your time working with that background, then also I want to give you our reasons as to why we do it this way, based off of obviously limitations that we may have working in a sport that plays every single day and things that you might not have thought of coming from the realm of sport that you were coming from. And it's kind of taken off. I think that he's been very passionate about the research. I feel like he's been eager to kind of continue to learn as far as like what different sides of the sport we can modify and what we can't. So I think it's been fun to work with him because it's definitely an area that I need to improve on, and so that's why I try to work with him as much as I can as far as the research and continue education with that side of the player development. But then I told him, I was like, "You're the expert on this part of it, so I want you to teach me and tell me why we need to change things to a different capacity." So that's one example, but there's plenty others I'm sure that I I refer to others on.
No, that's a really good example, and I think it's a mark of it's a good practice of leadership to be, first of all, to surround yourself with quality individuals, and secondly to be able to learn from the people that you find yourself leading. I think that's a very good mark of leadership, and I'm sure that, like we talked about just before, gives that individual that sense of belonging and that pride and ownership, and it's really motivating. I guess ultimately when you're leading people, you understand that at some point they might be in a position of leadership as well. So as much as you want to learn, because there's a couple different sides to it. Like obviously you want to learn and improve yourself as an individual, but you're also coming from a situation where you've been in their shoes, so to speak. So now that you have this position of leadership, you want to provide either what you saw was good, what that you saw you could improve on, and then again, now in the position of leadership, like they might find themselves in a role similar to yours, and you want them to sort of either hold a good standard that you've taught them and possibly improve as well.
Absolutely.
Zach, I'm curious. I don't know if we've talked about it, but I don't know if I ever actually asked you. Was get to the big leagues, be a strength coach in the sport I played at the highest level, lead a department. Were those active goals, or is that something that has sort of just happened? What's that been like?
Um, I think making it to the big leagues was definitely a goal. I thought being at that level was something I wanted to do in while I was playing. Uh, didn't work out. Coaching works. Um, so that was definitely part of the process, but then I think the goals kind of shifted as I kind of became more passionate about just player development and understanding the impact that we can have with the emphasis around developing instead of performing, which is obviously one aspect of it. But I find a lot of interest in seeing progress from A to B and being part of that journey with players at a young age to making it to the big leagues and seeing how that development changes from level to level. Um, and then how that, little caveat of development can change in the big leagues. Um, so it's cool. Like right now, it's really cool to have like a foot in kind of both camps. But yeah, I think my passion is more on the development side and just seeing how players can improve.
There's also some new challenges that clearly this position is most unique from your other ones, in terms of your responsibilities and what the day to day looks like and all that. But something I think that you and I have connected on is like always looking for some new way to grow through a different, like a new experience or some, like to say it again, just like a new challenge. Is that something that has that always been the case? Like as you're coming up through high school and college, is always looking for like a new thing, or is that something that you've developed over time? What's that like?
Yeah, I think so. I'd have to look at it. I don't know. I really like. I don't know if saying I like failing is the right way to say that, but I like being met with a challenge that I don't really know how to go around or get over, and then kind of figuring out different avenues or um, I guess different methods of going around certain obstacles. Um, Kind of puts you in different frames of mind that can kind of get you outside of a comfort zone. That's kind of just keeps you energized or keeps you um, I guess locked in. I don't know. Kind of keeps you from being complacent in a sense. I think it kind of helps me stay active.
Yeah, I know for me, it's always the what am I gonna learn from this, or what skill am I gonna acquire from this, or what ability am I gonna have after? Where that for me, like that complacent feeling is if I do the same thing again, and I feel like I've already learned maybe not all there is to learn, but a lot of what there is to learn from a certain role or experience or whatever, or certain environment. That if I do it again, then it's sort of like, am I gonna get complacent, stuck, and like, and there becomes like a boredom or lack of challenge there. So
Yeah.
it's no, I get it. It's there's always which did you experience that at all when you went back to back years in AAA?
I didn't. And the reason why was because my first year in AAA, I did not do a good job. I felt like it was something that there's a little bit of growing pains going to AAA, to where like obviously there's the department standards of what you want to get accomplished, but there's also the player standards of what they're going to allow you to do to them, or what they're going to allow SNC to I guess make them do. Uh, so in my mind, I was like, okay, we're doing strictly by the book. We're doing this A, B, C, D because that's what we have to do in our philosophy pillars, and then that obviously didn't get met with much. That got met with a lot of reluctance with some of our players, which was the first year definitely opened my eyes a lot more to how AAA was definitely not a higher double A. It wasn't like something that was far removed.
Can you
It was
explain that
not.
for? Because I don't think most people
Yeah,
would understand what that dynamic is.
yeah. So like in AAA, it's got the guys that have been recently been called up and then sent back down. The guys that have had a taste of the big leagues and then got sent back down to the 5 a.m. flights on Southwest. So they've experienced the highs and they got sent back down to what was just what used to be one of the better things coming from Double A to Triple A, but now they have a taste of the champagne and the bougie lifestyle of not having to handle your own luggage, and then they come back to Triple A. So everyone kind of has that bitter taste of success, more or less, that got stripped away from them because of player returned or poor performance or whatever it might be. Uh, so there's a little bit of hesitation to really engage sometimes with some of the players there because they're kind of reluctant
Yeah, what are some
to do more.
strategies to um, for guys that have been sent down or they're coming back off of something disappointing and maybe the motivation's been zapped from them or there's discouragement or
Mm,
anger and all that, but they still have to get better as big leaguers have to get better. And then also,
yeah,
like guess what? Someone's trying to get you out in a couple hours. Like game's
yeah.
still going. Um, what are some things that strategies that you've had in general that have worked, or things have you learned from that?
Yeah, so that was like why I thought my first year in AAA was a failure was because I knew that they had to get stuff done, but they didn't care who I was. Like it wasn't really like I in the past in low A and high A it was like, okay, you're the strength coach, I know you know you, me, you're gonna do this regardless. So let's have a good relationship. And to me it was like you have to do this and they're like, no, I don't. It's like, yes, you do. So there really wasn't me giving into any sort of buy-in as to who understanding who they are as a person, understanding what their quarrels were, what uh, their struggles were. So then when I got to be better at, understanding the person, creating that relationship and fostering growth in their relationship, they ended up confiding with me a bit more as to what makes them tick or why they don't want to do this. Okay, so okay, how can we collaborate and how can we negotiate some middle ground where hey, we get a little bit of what I want and a little bit of what you want, whether that's in training, whether that's in any kind of aspect of development. So I think what led to success and how you can be successful when working with players at that level is that understand that they were just at their dream. Like they were literally where they wanted to be since they were 5 years old. And then they got that taken away from them. And then now they're back in the big league or in AAA where they might have been doing great before, but now they have to knock on that door, bang on that door until they get that crack open again. And understand how hard that is to do. And then it's like, hey, I want you to get back there just as bad as you want to. And this is some ways we can obviously work to get you back to that door and get back to that grandest stage of playing in the big leagues in front of thousands and thousands of people. But it takes time because obviously first day coming back down, they're going to be pretty pissed off and rightfully so. But I think it comes from like years and years of fostering a relationship, but then also fostering the accountability. Like there's a lot of players that I know now that get called up, sent back down, who won't even skip a beat. They'll go back to their routine and do what they need to do because it's something that's kind of been instilled in their development. And I think that kind of starts from low A. So I think it's creating that philosophy now in the lower levels that gets ingrained in their development as they climb up the ranks. So that way they understand this isn't just something I do when I feel like it, but something that needs to get done on a regular basis. So that way it's seen as part of their development, as part of their routine of being consistent in a ball player day in, day out.
Yeah, that's something I was going to mention because you talked about earlier how you're seeing the younger generations and colleges kind of adopting these philosophies as well. I was curious if somebody's like up and down consistently, if they were able to kind of adjust to that routine, but I guess you answered that question. Has there been guys that have come down that their routines were just like, or their drive, I guess, was just like impressive and I guess inspiring for you? I'm sure you have experienced stuff like that.
Absolutely. I feel like it might take a few times, but I feel like there's some times where players understand that maybe that they're going to be a fringe player for their career. They might not be career lifetime big leaguers and they might have to spend their time getting called up, sent down. So as soon as like that's a part of realization for them is where it's like, okay, well, this is what it's going to be. I can continue to try to progress and get better so that way I can end up being that everyday big leaguer. But I also need to understand that my name might get called in a month with how sporadically I get called up and sent down. If I'm not doing my shit and staying on top of my P's and Q's, then I can get in a slump and then they might end up sending somebody else up because I'm just not performing when I'm supposed to be. Um, but you will run into guys that kind of like reach that level and then they kind of start having that negative self-talk or might have starting to get the excuse illness and it's kind of like, well, what else can I do? I can't do anything else because I made up there. I did good. They still sent me down. What else can I possibly do? So it's kind of like trying to understand that and kind of nip that in the bud when you can. If you have a relationship with the guys, kind of make sure it's like, hey, like it's part of the game. Opportunities will come. And it's kind of just, there's parts to it that we just can't control. So it's understanding that and not letting the excuse illness kind of take over.
It's definitely a completely different aspect of what like what we've talked about that you do, and it's definitely a lot of it is definitely timing, I would imagine, like when you have those kinds of conversations, and like you said, understanding the player. Also, I was curious about this earlier too, but do you speak Spanish well?
Not as good as Kyle,
No,
but
okay,
what I
yeah,
keep over.
Kyle is I remember when he was really getting into it and everything on his phone was in Spanish. I was like, damn, dude, you really dove headfirst into that.
Yeah,
But
he's committed.
yeah, I was curious if like what it's like I guess forming relationships with guys from different cultures too, guys who speak different languages, like what that's like for you as well. I'm sure that's really being somebody like yourself who likes to learn. I'm sure that's really exciting and I guess energizing too.
Yeah, what I've realized is like when you're working in sports, the better you are at talking shit, the better you are at building relationships. So if you so if you can talk shit in Spanish, you'll kind of earn their respect more or less, which is like learning the first 20 words I probably learned in Spanish were all cuss words or some variation of them, and I feel like that more or less opens them up a bit more to kind of confide in you and whatever English they can, or struggle to find some Spanish that we can both understand. But I feel like when they see you trying and then see you failing at a language that is, obviously first language for them, it kind of makes them feel less awkward about them trying to learn English and them trying to open up with the language that they don't know. And it's hard for them too. They're in a foreign land that they don't know, or they can't speak the language, or if they can, it's not nearly as well as we can yet. But at the same time, it's like trying to show vulnerability to them to allow them to open up to you. And uh, honestly, God, I feel like I have some really close relationships with a lot of Latin players that we might be able to speak 5 words together in each other's language, but it's just like the authenticity of struggling and showing vulnerability to them kind of opens them up a bit.
But
That's
also,
beautiful. The vulnerability thing's huge.
Hmm.
I was gonna say it also like the talking shit part, like it opens the door for them to bitch because they could do it in a way that's like talking shit to you, but then and if they don't sound great doing it because you've expressed that um, you're not super proficient in Spanish, it makes it a little bit more comfortable. And then I think when you combine that with the consistency, is like okay, like we're gonna do this, but hey, we're doing these jumps today that we're doing every time you lift, or we got to do this warm up, and I know you don't like it, but we're working on it. And so if you can be uh, that piece where they feel comfortable, but then also that like caring but firm, where you're still like, no, we're getting this done. That part's I think the blend is super important. That's something that I've not learned as I've moved up to low A, but I've realized that like if I want to get something done, at least at this level, if I want to get something done with the players, if I just do it 4 or 5 days in a row and then continue to do it when they're like, "Are we doing it today?" I'm like, "Yes." Then by like day 6 or 7, they're if I if we're not doing it for a certain like one-off reason, they're like, "Hey, we're not doing this." So it's like the habit, the consistency, and the habits are important, and that certainly sets the foundation for by the time they get up. That like, hey, I've been doing this certain thing throughout my whole career. Like, I don't have to do it anymore. Like, what do you mean? It could help in those instances.
For sure.
And talking shit is the lifeblood of everything. It really is. It really is. It breaks the ice. That's a really good. That's. I'm glad you brought that up because it breaks the ice. Eases the tension a little bit.
Hmm. 100%.
And I was kind of switch gears here for a second. Since you are now you're based out of Houston, but you're traveling a lot more, and I'm going to make an assumption that you could head back to Dallas here and there. Have you been able to get out and do any hunting or any of that during the season as a couple like one-offs with old Skip?
I have not. So that was the benefit of how the season lined up, was that like waterfowl hunting season started when baseball season ended and then was over like a month or so before the season started. So it was a perfect blend of seasons for me. But there's other seasons that go on, but I haven't participated in much deer or turkey hunting or things like that kind of go on during baseball, and I don't know if I will, but no, I have not gone hunting. I need to try fishing though. I got my poles in the back of my truck, but I have not wet the hook yet.
In case you all run, Zach does have a truck.
I never would have guessed, honestly.
But no, Dwayne, Zach's got this dog where he'll. I'm not someone who hunts, not for any particular reason. I just haven't done it. And Zach will go out and shoot a duck, and his dog will just take off on cue, find it, bring it back, and like set it the correct way, which is pretty dope.
That's sick.
How do you
That
teach
was
That's
that?
actually that was actually that was actually the first thing I told myself was if I can teach my dog how to hunt, then I'll coach. I was like, if I can teach my dog, I will try coaching. Because that was like as I was a grad assistant, I got my dog, and he was 6 weeks old when we got him, and I got him as I was a grad assistant. So I would train him 2 to 3 times a day before work, at lunch, and then after work. And I was like, this fucker better take. But so I was like, if this works, then I'll see if I can train people. So I ended up working out for most part. But I remember that was actually the thing. I read like three books about waterfowl hunting and dog training.
Yeah, how do you go
Um,
about that? Tell me about that.
it was really fun. I mean, it was kind of a lot of old school type training methods. Was like learning first obedience, body training, but then learning obedience like sit, stay, here, come. Uh, a lot of it was like constraint learning, which is interesting to say as far as like training dogs. But one of the most important things that people might say no to is like not using treats. One of the things that one of the books read that I read said was using like positive affirmation or positive reinforcement is like the best way of confirming an action or ensuring that an action will continue to take place post like a cue. So like if you say sit, it's like you lose your fucking mind with how good that was. That was the best sit that's ever been sat in the world ever. And then like you have to go about that being your reaction whenever the dog sits. When you say come, it's like, wow, you came. That's incredible. Like you're the best dog ever. And then when they stay, it's like, wow, that's so good. And like it kind of goes on and on and on. And like the dog's like, holy shit, I'm incredible. The dog just has like the most impactful response to what you do. And it gets more and more to where like they talk about one of my favorite was doing like directions. So like you kind of like drop a bumper and like without the dog looking, and you have them sit and you just tell them to run off into the vacant beyond, with the assumption of there being some kind of buoy out there from the grab. Which like the first few times is so awkward because the dog will take 2 steps and look back like, where the hell am I going? But it's like it's funny because you have to like develop the trust. Is what they say is you have to first lay out the framework of them fetching what they can see, and then you hide it, and you have them sit and you tell them to go. Like, where am I going? Oh shit, there's a thing right there. And then they develop trust in you. Where it's like, okay, well this guy tells me to go here. There's going to be something there. I'm going to. So we get to like 30, 40, 50 yards, and this guy's just taking off on a dead sprint, going God knows where, but he knows that I told him to go there. And most times there's going to be a bumper there, and it was just really cool to see that take place. But it was that was a
That's so cool,
fun
the
activity.
parallels um, between like building the trust, and I love the part about the positive affirmation being so much stronger than just giving them something. Like it's almost
Mm-hmm.
the like, hey, I did what I was supposed to, and then they get a treat. It's like very transactional. It's like, okay, here, take this.
Yeah.
Whereas like rewarding players with like some sort of point or a score or money, like it's motivating, but it's not like at the end of the day, the player, if they trust or respect the person that they're learning from, and this is true as adults, if you're not even in coaching, just someone you look up to in general, their the approval of someone that you look up to, or that you respect their opinion or at least their feedback, and then also being held accountable by that person is so much more impactful than um, like any other superficial monetary or
treats.
whatever. Yeah, treats, like metaphorical treats. It's not it's just not how it goes. So I'm thinking the giving dogs treats for doing random things is a huge pet peeve of mine. But the whole
Dude.
it's just a good way to get a dog fat. And it
Yeah.
honestly, giving the dog the treat is more for the person. It's for the person
Yeah.
to feel good because
It
they get to
is.
see the dog happy, and it's like, oh, I'm giving them happiness. It's like no, you just walk them. They love exercising. They just spent 40 minutes outside. Like you gave that to them. They can't do that without you, and now you're feeding them extra.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I
Exactly.
do.
Yeah,
I've
that is
often
bullshit.
had this like nostalgic Um, do you remember in when we were in Greenville in 21, where they had the clubby or the grounds crew guy had the boxer, the dog, like this beautiful dog that would run around the
Yeah,
outfield all day. I
yeah, yeah.
I was always like, one day I'll have this dog and be perfectly trained and all this. And every time I say to myself, I'm like, I have no time to train a dog, and I'm not going to be with him. Uh, but
Yeah,
the training would be so fun.
it really is. It really. I will say that so not electric collars are a thing, and they're a thing for a reason. Uh, Mainly for dog safety, but also for training. Because there was a time for when I didn't have a shot collar, and my dog was just abusive to me and trying to get him to come here, and he would not, and then all this kind of stuff. It was like in the book they talk about it being like the teenage years of rebellious training. Uh, but once you get to obviously get past that and everything kind of runs smoothly and you have like you can see the progress. There's nothing like it. But like the thing is just how much time that goes into it. I'm sure you could like the obedience training is probably one of the easier things, but it's very fulfilling whenever you get a dog to do the things you want it to. And then honestly, I don't know. I've been thinking about having puppies with this one. I don't know if I'm going to be able to, but still thinking about
Oh, that would be cool.
it.
This is the stuff people didn't think they were getting on this episode today.
Yeah.
That's cool though. Yeah, you have any other hobbies other than making like training a stud dog and hunting?
uh, Lifting, golf.
Let's go.
I like to play pickup basketball with random ass people. One of my favorite hobbies.
Is that like at a local gym or just you just pull up to any yard? Like I don't know, like you just going driving around neighborhoods like all right, let's go. Somebody's getting it right
You
now.
and me, you and me, 12 you. Let's go.
Let's go.
No, no. There was a time we traveled to New York last year and we played pickup at one of like the coolest New York like parks. I don't know. It was like literally on the water, like overlooking downtown. It was a really cool spot. But it was always one of my things. I would travel with basketball shoes everywhere we would go and play pickup at like 24-hour fitness or go to some public park that we know there's games at or something like that, and then just try to play pickup. Because that was like where my training shifted after baseball finished. Was just I seem to do windmill dunks like 24/7 now. I'm still not there yet, but working on it. But yeah, I really love just to play basketball and kind of get those competitive juices somewhere else once that like playing baseball stopped and got to find other ways to fill that void.
Yeah, and golf's a bitch, man. That's how you know golf's a bitch. You'd rather learn how to fucking windmill dunk than maybe work on your short game, you know? How long you been golfing for?
I've done it for a while. I've golfed probably since I was like 10 or 12.
That's sick. I wish I started earlier. I started like 3 years ago.
Yeah, there's times when I'm okay, and there's times that make me feel like that okay was just a spur of the moment luck thing that just never came back again. But yeah, it's a tough game. Those guys are really good on TV.
I know. And it really isn't until you start trying to play that you realize that, you know?
Mm.
Like when I started playing, I because my dad has played forever and I was like, oh, I want to spend some more time with my dad, play some golf with him and stuff. So I remember I spent like 6 months from, I think, that whole spring into the early summer just going to the driving range with him and one of my friends. And then once I started playing, I would just call him and be like, bro, like Tiger Woods was fucking crazy, man. Like how did he do that? Because again, being somebody who never really played golf, you're like, oh, obviously he's the GOAT, he's the GOAT, whatever. But then now you're watching highlights and you have some experience on the golf course. It's like, bro, that guy was a fucking magician, you know?
Especially when you go and play on like courses that are manicured to that's standard with greens that are like as slick as this table that I'm on. It's just like, how is what you do even possible?
Yeah. Yeah,
It's nuts.
it is.
Did you have a similar? I don't know if experience is the right word, but did you get desensitized to that in the big leagues? Because obviously, like you knew some of the guys,
To
just
mm,
the ability that's on the field. Because there's nothing
oh
better.
yeah, it's really well. That was the one thing. So like going from the big leagues and like my first, I guess, game that I had seen like since big league, obviously the spring training games was like going to Fayetteville and watching the guys play. It's like wow, like there's a big gap, and like not that they're not professional, like they're obviously very good at what they do, but it's just very like some polishing needs to happen. There's still obviously still developing that needs to go on to where it's like if you go to the big leagues, it's like this is as like depending on the night as pure and as pristine as a game can be played, aside from like one error there, like maybe a miscue, but like other than that, like this is the best quality of this sport that you can play, and you almost grow numb to it after seeing it every day, but it's honestly incredible to see.
Yeah, the gap is large, which is wild because it's the players in low A, like the college guys. These were the top 1% of college players or whatever. A couple high school guys, but like they're basically the top 1% at that level. They come to pro ball, and it's a huge adjustment, and they're still like so far. Uh, I mean,
Yeah,
obviously, there's like multiple levels, and guys spend a year ish at each level, roughly. Um, so like, there's a long ways to go, but the difference is huge. Uh,
I
plus,
think
like,
a lot of it is like the arousal of like so a lot of these guys that play in SEC or whatever, like they're like locked in hardcore for like 3 games a week or 4 games a week, and then like perhaps the monotony catches up in like a big league or like a professional baseball season to where it's like this is a game 112, chopper down the line, like perhaps the same arousal of game in game out might be like glossed over at times whenever like those that really obviously produce or move to the next level kind of can have that same locked in approach with every pitch and then not lose focus from pitch to pitch. And I think it just goes to show how impactful the mental game is of being locked in and staying in tune with what's in front of you and not kind of losing focus in that sense.
yeah, well, I've heard a few different big leaguers in one way or another say that the game's almost like scripted. Not like it's not suggesting it's fixed or whatever, but like if you hit a ball a certain way into the gap, like based on where the outfielders are playing and based on how fast you are as a runner, like the guy's not going to misplay it. He's not going to overthrow the cutoff. So it's like that's a double. I just have to run somewhat hard. I'll get the second on time, and that's it. So the game almost becomes like from as I've heard it, like it can become monotonous in that sense. Where if you like you
Yeah.
said, you're on game 112 and you're like, oh, I hit this ball over here. It's a double. It's probably not a triple. Like I'm tired. Stand up double. Great, awesome. Whereas if you're playing the SEC and this is like we've got to beat our rival and you hit that ball. Now all of a sudden you're fired up about potential triple or you're just the excitement and you're the full sprint. It's a whole different thing.
Yeah. No, for sure.
What was your favorite part about working up there?
Oh man. I think it was just being a part of like just the player development, like being part of the players day to day. Um, we're very fortunate in that a lot of the players trained. Um, obviously, we would like to do things, if not different, more often, if not more often than at all, more in the weight room. Um, but there was definitely components where we had uh, a pretty good piece of the pie as far as like how we can make sure these players are ready for this next game or how we can make this player better with this facet of his swing or his pitch or whatever it might be. So I think the best part was going through the ups and downs, like being a part of it and knowing that like we had a good stake in what was going on and like we definitely felt the highs and felt the lows. Um, that was probably the best part was just being in front of the thousands of fans and seeing the players perform and do well, but then also being part of the struggles and knowing like, hey man, like you're good, we're here, let's go. You got what you can do, what you got to do. It's just part of the grind and be a part and be like a shoulder if they need one, and but also celebrate those victories when they have them.
Being at that highest level in an organization that, from my perspective, seems to be like ahead of the curve on some things, a lot of things, I would say, just again from my perspective. But what are some things or qualities that you see, whether it's from a coaching standpoint, S&C standpoint, or a player standpoint, that you're like, well, no shit that these guys are all successful. No shit that this program's successful. Like, what are just some things that you point to and you're like, okay, this makes sense. This makes sense why this guy is so fucking good.
Uh, One of my favorite guys I working with was Alex Bregman, and like his quality is just pure obsession. Like he named his kid Knox, like after a knock. Like he's obsessed with baseball. And if he's not working out or if he's not hitting in the cage, he's watching video. He's not watching video for himself. He's watching video for the pitcher for that night for our team to give hitting updates or give information about opposing hitters' swing to the pitcher who's pitching that day. So like the guy was locked in on every aspect of the game. It was just honestly one of the more incredible things to see was just how obsessed he was with the game. And that's kind of what it comes down to is just how devoted are you to your craft. Obviously, when it gets to the big leagues, the majority, the 50th percentile of guys in the big leagues are probably just as good as the best that are in AAA. So at that time, it's not how you are at your peak, but it's what you are day after day and how you can, come to the park every day with a routine of being at the peak or a percentage of your best each day and being consistent with that routine because it's 162 games in like 170 some days, 180 days, whatever it is. So knowing how long the season is, knowing that you have to be accountable, to have the foresight of knowing what's important to do consistently to where you get to the finish line and you're going to feel as you are day one, obviously not as you are, but to hold a similar standard as to what you were day one of the season. And like obviously just deals with a lot of accountability and maturity, I think is a big one too.
Zach,
I
how
think
much?
hitting on the sorry, go ahead,
No, go
Kyle.
ahead. You're good.
Well, I was gonna say you're talking about like accountability and some ownership there at the end. We talk about leadership a lot on here. I think it's a lot of times like an essence of why it is that we do this. Um, but what are some aspects of leadership you see at that level too? From could be like from anybody or just as a group, because I think a lot of times like everything gets very individualized, which makes sense because it's one guy versus one guy on the mound versus like a batter or one guy making a play out in the field. But what are some things in regards to leadership that you notice at that level that are impressive?
Yeah, I think it's very important as the context. I feel like there's big and small like leadership opportunities. I think as far as like what the context depend or provides. So if it's like the team's 0 for the or 0 and 20, like obviously it's more of a group discussion with discussions led by the leaders. But then I think like more or less the bigger role that a leader plays a level like that is leading by the example. We had like Michael Brantley, who's one of the best baseball players who have played. And what was really truly fascinating about him was just like no matter what happened the day before, he was the same guy with the same routine. Like he did what he needed to do. It was very businesslike. So I think it's something that gets lost in athletics is like, okay, I play a sport, I play, which yeah, you're right, you should be playing, but you should have a level of professionalism to understand this is your job, this is what you need to do day in, day out to do what you have to do. Put trust in the people that are around you that they know what's right or what's best for you, and that they have the expertise, like from trainers, hitting coaches, pitching coaches, whatever. Collaborate, work with them, but put a lot of effort into your craft, into your body, so that way you're prepared for this season, the next day, the next week. But I think that's what a good leader does with how many minor leaguers or new professional baseball players that come up every year is to provide a template of what it looks like to be a big leaguer. Because there's not probably as many opportunities to be like get in your face leader and like speak down to you or kind of or the opposite of like uplifting you, like come on man, we can do this. Which like obviously there's plenty of that, but I think with how many young players there are that are in the big league locker room, like they're so hyper focused and hyper aware of everything that's going on because they're so nervous that they're gonna try to see what the big leaguers are doing, and then obviously the leader that sets the best example is the one that ends up being accepted as the best leader.
That's such a good point. Something you've said to me in the past was that uh, even in AAA a little bit, but you definitely said this to me when you were in the big leagues last year, that like a lot of the like how much work guys are going to put in or not is very player driven. Like
Mm-hmm.
if certain guys that have a lot of influence over the clubhouse are doing quality work often, or they're like, hey, like no, you got to lift today, let's go. Then that has the biggest impact, more than like like you're not making them go, or maybe manager not coming in and be like, you guys better be lifting. Like it's much more of the culture seems to permeate more than like what's written down as on the schedule to do.
Yeah, 100%. There's a standard schedule of like what's going on outside, like what's available to you type thing before the game starts. I think the biggest thing is like as far as you said with the culture and like the standard you set in a clubhouse, like the manager, the coaches, and all that can do what we can to foster the growth of whatever culture there is. But like as far as the true adherence or the integrity of what we decide their culture to be, strictly comes from like the players. Um, so like we can obviously point people in the right direction, try to hold people accountable, but at the end of the day, like they can say fuck off to anything that you really want to say or have them do. Uh, so that's one of the things too. Like from our side, that's why education is so important. And then from every side, to be honest, like what are nutrition, sleep, athletic training, recovery, S&C. It's like everything's going to be met with like a why. Why am I going to do this? Why would I want to do this? And then sooner or later, after a few weeks, that relationship starts to get built out. They start to see the successes of having done something like that, and then perhaps it comes a lot easier. And then at that point, perhaps the culture can be changed from like an essence of getting buy-in from like the veteran players, getting buy-in from the masses of the group. Uh, and then as you get newcomers that come in that have been used to a different foundation or a different culture at other organizations, then they see like, oh shit, they actually do stuff here. They do this differently. So it's like, I think the majority of everything comes down to education and this getting the relationships developed to harness or to foster that type of growth in the clubhouse.
Yeah, I was going to ask you when you said earlier, um, you're talking about how the obsession and just the mentality and I guess the consistency and stubbornness with showing up every day and having good intent day after day after day. Um, how much do you think that can be developed, or I guess coached, as a player is going up through their journey, and then if it can to a certain degree, like how is that facilitated?
I think it's all internal motivation. So I think it really just depends on isolating what's important to the athlete and kind of understanding their why as to why they do things. And perhaps the why for one athlete might be to be the best baseball player in the world. The why for another athlete might be I want to have as much money as I possibly can. And like the routes to those whys will be different, but in essence, getting the best out of both will still give success to their performance. Uh, so it's kind of like, okay, well, how can I appeal to your why, and how can you make your process appeal to your why? Then how can we obviously show an impact as to what these being professional will have in your why, and how can we produce or promote that longevity of that kind of forethought or accountability into your development or your processes.
Yeah, I think about that often. Um, I'm not in a position where I make decisions on whether players get moved up or not, and I'm not a scout that decides, should this can this college player be a big leaguer one day, or should we, or like in Dwayne's case, like is this freshman or is this junior, senior in high school someone that's going to be a good fit for us moving forward at the next level? Um, but that like the old school saying is you don't have to tell a future big leaguer to go take ground balls. You don't have to tell a future big leaguer to like compete up there or to try hard or to wake up, make sure he gets to bed on time. Like it's this hands off, like he has it or he doesn't kind of a thing, which honestly I think is true more than it's not. But I think our job is to understand where that internal drive comes from, and then just how do we get it a little bit better. That's pretty much all that's in our control. So I love that you talk about that. Like,
Yeah.
what's their why? Where's that come from? And then like, how can I reach them? Because that's ultimately, if there is going to be some
Yeah.
sort of a change, that's substantial. Like, it's going to come through that route. It's not going to be, oh, we just, I was on his ass and made sure every day that he was there, and I called him to wake up on time. Like that's just not it.
Mm-hmm. For sure. You see a lot of that too. Like, you see that with guys that I've worked with in the past, which like at the end of the day, that's where I find like a bit of a conundrum of like if when you have players that are struggling at putting in the extra mile at things that they don't like I feel like S&C is always going to have a little bit of an issue as far as getting players to be 100% bought in with consistent effort and intensity and frequency into the weight room. Um, Aside from them kind of having that, like understand that it's an important facet of their development. I get it, but there'll be times where I push players to do things they don't want to do. They do it. They do it. They get better. They get better. They might not see the benefit of it at the time, but they'll see it like in the future whenever they get to obviously where they want to be. But at that time too, it's not necessarily that they kept to that consistent routine because it was something that I made them do when they were in low A. They were consistent because they were still made to do it in high A and double A. Then when it gets to the point to where they don't have to do what the coach says because they're at that higher level of playing, and then it's like, yeah, I don't have to do it. I want to do it. But then you get to a level, it's like, no, you're going to do it. It's like, I don't know. I feel like there's benefit to pushing players past what they're internally driven to do, but then there's also a level of drawback to where that's good, but long term they're not going to have that same
Yeah, I was
amount of
about to say
drive
that's like a cute thing. It's a short term. Like it's good to
Yeah.
periodically push
It'll
them
kind of
out
come
of their
out eventually,
Yeah.
All comes out in the wash, Kyle, baby. Really does.
Well, yeah, I mean, if
Exactly.
you like players doing pretty good work, and then at some point you push them past, like that's uncomfortable, and if they have your trust, like it might have an effect. But if you're doing that all the time, it's not gonna like it's just not gonna work. Um,
Yeah.
there's something to that. It's the whole art of it,
Mm-hmm.
the whole
Well, I
damn thing we're
mean,
doing.
you talked about it earlier though. You mentioned like maturity at the big league level, and I think being able to see long term the effects or the positive impact that a routine that you were kind of describing that some of these high level guys do, the maturity to say to yourself like, hey, I got to make these decisions, not sacrifices, like Sean said, these decisions, and I need to invest my time into this because it's going to help me. Like that takes a degree of maturity. So sometimes that comes with experience, and frankly, like sometimes it's not going to happen for some guys. Like it might be them looking back and being like, fuck, I should have, did this. I'm sure we've all done that. I look back on certain things as an athlete for sure, and I'm like, well, no shit, I didn't become a big leaguer. Like, you know what I mean? Like at the time
Yeah.
when you're competitive, you're like, what the fuck? Like, what do I got to do? And then I look back and I'm like, huh, dumbass. Like,
No shit.
yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy. Like it's easier when you have the hindsight, after the
Mm-hmm.
fact, looking back on it to reflect, which I guess is like Kyle just said, the art of coaching, trying to
Well, they have to remember
say
that,
to,
like what it's like
yeah,
to be in the moment, confused, frustrated, not knowing like how things work or not.
yeah,
Like I catch myself every so often being like, they don't understand that if they doesn't look a certain way or they can't do a certain thing, then like they're just not going to move up. And the reason they're not moving up is not because of this, it's really because of that. But they have no idea because they can't see it. And we might have not told them that's how it really works, or maybe we told them once, but they forgot or they don't believe it. It's I have things I question that all the time. It's like, what are yeah, like I don't know, like how can you do a
Yeah.
better job of
Kyle, you
really
frozen?
appreciating?
Oh,
I
you were
hear
frozen there for a second.
I hear
Now I
myself
see-
in real
now-
life. I don't know about you guys. You got me?
I'm not.
Am I still frozen?
No, you're good now. You're good. I
Sorry.
just your audio cut out for me. I don't know if it cut out for you too, Zach. But
Yeah, I did for a little bit, but you were good.
Brutal. Well, that's right. I don't know the last thing you heard me say, if it was profound or not, but
it was.
Absolutely.
It was.
Hmm.
I mean, it's like it makes sense though why you see. I mean, obviously you only really hear about the successful ones because that's just like how things are. But you look at like the holidays, and you see like they've seen what hard work, what high level looks like. They have like a roadmap, I guess, so to speak, of how they get there, and it's like, well, I mean, it's and obviously stud athletics, good genetics, all that stuff, whatever. But I think I may have read something sometime where it talked about like kids of big leaguers or siblings of big leaguers and how they have success because simply they're watching, or it's like the whole little brother thing where the little brother is a better athlete because he's been dragged around to the field all the time and which I've definitely seen my fair share of. It's you get exposed to a higher level. Meanwhile, when you're the highest level of baseball I knew at 10U was 10U baseball. I wasn't watching. I didn't have an older sibling to go and watch what it should look like or anything like that. I was kind of just figuring things out as I went along.
No, for sure.
If I had a fucking good S&C program, back in my day, would have been in the big leagues.
Oh, man.
no,
What are you gonna do?
definitely agree with that. I'm the oldest, and my dad was never a big leaguer by any stretch, but I've watched him problem solve like for my whole life, and that's something he's really good at. And it's like, oh, like maybe that's why I could figure some things out. And I'm reminded of our manager is Dominican. I love the guy. We'll have him on at some point. But he he is learning. He's learned a ton. He works extremely hard. He's super open to criticism, but there's things that he like from as an American. It's just like no, like figure it out this way, like and reminded it's like well, he just doesn't have the roadmap. Like he hasn't seen what that process looks like. Um, and in my case, at least with my dad, like I haven't seen a bad example of how to solve a problem much growing up. So it's like, why would you do it this way? It's like, well, so circling it back to the again, if you've watched your older brother with his team, like crush BP all the time, and you realize that hey, like they dress a certain way, and hey, they don't wear their hat sideways and whatever, and then you kind of have it figured out a little bit more.
My older brother's just shoved me into the bushes. That's what I got.
Well, you know how to shove people into bushes, I guess.
Maybe that's why you got
I wouldn't
strong.
fucking go around. I wouldn't go around any bushes around you now, knowing that you're gonna fucking shove my ass in there, dude. Come on now.
Don't play pickup basketball with Zach. He'll come down for a rebound and the nearest bush you'll be.
Fuck.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you the last
no.
time I played basketball. That shit's just ugly. My version of basketball is being like a 13-year-old and just shooting baseballs into the bucket still to this day. To this day.
Well, Zach, I appreciate that
That's great.
out of you for for coming on and joining.
No, absolutely. It was a
Yeah,
hell of a time.
Yeah, it was
Appreciate you
fun.
having me.
yeah. I'm glad that we obviously we covered all like the S&C stuff, but the other stuff in the coaching too. I was excited for that because those are the
Oh, that's
conversations we
cool.
like having. Yeah,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's sick. And also, just one you don't get up in front of the pro baseball guys and have like a locker room big time motivational speech and then it's like, let's fucking go and lift like 550 pounds. Like, do you guys do that? You're not doing that? That's
No,
not what
no,
you
that
do?
doesn't. That does not happen. I want to go to a place where that does happen, but that's not currently happening.
I want you. I want to show you how great I am. That kind of shit. We'll make an edit. We'll make an
We can do
yeah.
edit.
it.
Yeah, we can do
get
it.
there.
Springs
Yeah.
Training 2026. We'll get the
Yeah.
entire organization into the weight room, which will be a fire hazard, and then we'll blast the music, and we'll make sure that whenever whoever's squatting or doing name your exercise, we'll have the cameraman be on an iPhone, and he'll shake from
Yeah.
the roof, not handling the intensity of the moment.
God, I can't wait.
Yeah.
Velo slaps. Like you just slapping like a freaking big leaguer on the back before he throws. Just like, let's
Oh.
fucking go.
There was before every game last year, I would velo slap John Singleton on the chest 3 times as hard as I fucking could. I got a picture of it from one of our PR people that walk around with the pictures, where I'm like about like get the eyes of a murderer, just like trying to slap the soul out of him. And I swear to God, like he walks away from it like nothing ever happened. But I swear my hand was like broken for like a month after the season. But I love to give a good velo slap.
That's sick.
Man.
And you could blame your golf game on that shit too.
No, fucking. I don't know.
The velo slaps. Now I'm fucking duffing all my irons. God damn it.
Stuff in my irons,
Oh
but
my
man,
God.
did you see the homer?
The homer you hit? God, that's good.
All right, before
Yeah,
I
appreciate
freeze
you
again.
hopping on and sharing your knowledge. That was fun. That was a good one.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate it. That was a great time. I appreciate y'all's
Yeah,
questions. Those were great.
we'll have there was no plan, Zach, if you couldn't tell. Yeah. It's
That was
just
great.
we start chatting, and then if something comes up, we ask.
Yeah, let's just
Right.
go.
Yeah, we'll have you on again in
No,
the
I like
off
it.
season after the year's done with, and we can spend more time talking about that
You
fact
can be
that
in
it
full
actually,
camo when you're on next time.
yeah,
Yeah, I'll bring my dog with me. My dog will be on the iPhone. How about that? I'll
There.
set Skip up on the phone and I'll be on the computer.
yeah. We'll have
Okay.
conversations with Skip, and we'll talk about how it actually does snow in Texas. That's something I learned from you. You're like,
Not
it's
very
cold now.
often.
I'm like, no, it's not. And then you're like, no, it's like 28 and it's snowing. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeesh.
Yeah.
It's not often, but when it happens, no one's prepared for it. So it's great, including our road crews.
All
I
right,
couldn't
dude.
imagine
Well,
that.
I look forward to. I'll see you again at some point this year, and we'll have
For
you
sure.
on again. But thanks,
All right,
dude.
that sounds good. Thank you, Dwayne. Nice to meet you.
Nice meeting you, brother. Talk
Y'all
soon.
have a
Be
good
well.
one. You too.